June 14 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Ms. Felica, would you call the roll, please?
Here.
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 First on today's agenda, we have approval of council minutes from April 24, May 7, May 10, May 14, and May 21. It was a busy month. Anybody have any additions, corrections?
Move we approve the minutes.
Second.
Ms. Felica?
Aye.
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 This takes us to matters of special privilege, of which we have 3 today. The first is a resolution honoring Vice Mayor Scott Foster. This is his last city council meeting in his 8-year term. My colleagues will just momentarily be reading a resolution honoring Mr. Foster, but I just want to say a few words before that. And Scott, mostly, I want to say thank you. It's been a great 8 years having you on council. As I mentioned to him earlier today, Scott, everybody knows Scott was the first student from William and Mary elected to council. When that happened, I had no idea what to expect. But we've had a lot of fun and adventure along the way. And Scott has been a terrific contributor. He has an unmatched level of exuberance on council, although Councilman Zhang is pushing close from behind. Scott also has an impressive degree of vision. And not only can he see potential in the city, but he helps us follow through and make those things happen. He really sees the possibilities and has most definitely helped us do a better job in his time on council. But most of all, I want to just congratulate Scott on his uncanny ability to make me feel old. It was the first time in my life that somebody really pushed me over the edge, and I realized it's time to make room for other people coming through. So, Scott, now my colleagues are going to read a resolution.
Yes, this resolution of commendation and appreciation to the Honorable D. Scott Foster, Jr. Whereas Scott was first elected to the Williamsburg City Council in 2010 and re-elected for another term in 2012, and has diligently and faithfully served the citizens of Williamsburg throughout his tenure, which expires June 30th, 2018. And
Whereas Scott decided not to seek re-election, stating his desire to spend more time pursuing his love of the outdoors with his wife Liz and dog June. And
whereas Scott applied himself with vigor and determination in his campaign for office, reaching out to all residents of the city, and was the first William and Mary student to be elected to city council, seeking to build bridges among his constituents throughout. And
whereas Scott's main purpose for running for city council were to improve relations between the city and the College of William and Mary, and to improve the vibrancy of the downtown area. Tremendous progress has been made in both of these areas. Today, the city and the college enjoy a mutually beneficial relationship, collaborating on a number of different issues that have had major impacts on the quality of life for both residents and students alike. The downtown area is in the midst of a revitalization, as seen in the number of new businesses, restaurants, and special events. And
whereas Scott will be remembered as a pioneer for student representation on city council, as well as the various city boards and commissions, and for his work on the city's comprehensive plan.
now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the citizens of Williamsburg, the City Council does hereby thank and commend the Honorable D. Scott Foster for public service of the highest order, and are thankful that he will remain in Williamsburg and be an active part of the community.
And this is signed by all 4 of his colleagues on City Council. Thanks again, Scott.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, sir.
And I'd just like to acknowledge Scott's wife, Liz, who is here with us today. Liz, thanks so much for being here and for allowing Scott the time and the ability to serve with us. We appreciate that.
Before.
Oh, yeah, please, if anybody wants to jump in.
Scott, thank you. You've been a great friend, a great steward of the city, as I mentioned earlier at lunch. You've helped redirect this battleship of the city into a positive direction, and so I'm going to miss you up here, but I look forward to seeing you in the future, hearing from you, getting your guidance, and so thank you, Doug. Good on you.
If you don't mind, just very briefly, Scott, I mentioned this before, but you've been a trailblazer from a student perspective. I don't think anyone else could have been a better leader than you as the first student to be elected to the Williamsburg City Council. And your legacy will no doubt carry forth even after your term is ended. But on another note, I see that Scott has found already another true passion of his, which is to be a model. And for those, I want you to pick up Next Door Neighbor, and you will definitely see Scott's face for all eternity. But thank you, Scott. It's much appreciated.
Liz is next to him.
I know, that's right.
Well, and I just wanted to say that I will miss being at your right hand, and I think it's a little ironic. We both come from rural areas of the state of Virginia, but share a very progressive attitude towards the future of Williamsburg. And so I look forward to continue seeing you and Liz around town and getting insight and good ideas and having your youth and vitality and,
Thank you.
and good common sense.
Thank you.
Did you want to actually say something?
I've got some more unscripted thoughts for the end of the meeting, as we've got a long docket today.
Great.
But I will, just to back up Paul a little bit, Benny now fills the role of making me feel old, because his experience at William and Mary and in the city is even different than mine, even though it's only 4 years younger. Thanks to you all. You've made service a pleasure, and thanks to the citizens of Williamsburg for believing in me twice to fill this role. I feel really confident leaving council knowing that we're headed in a positive direction. I would probably not have chosen not to run again were I not confident in our future. So thanks to all of you for being a part of that, and thanks to this council and Clyde and Judy for their support.
Thanks. Excuse me. As I said, we have two more presentations today. At this time, I'd like to ask Walter Thomas Major to come forward. Congratulations to Walter Thomas Major. Congratulations on receiving the Eagle Scout Award, the highest award in Boy Scouting. Only 2 in 100 young men who start Boy Scouts achieve this worthy goal. You met all the requirements necessary to be a recipient of this significant honor through your efforts to complete the task of earning merit badges and your ability and skill in acquiring the various ranks and stages in the award process. The Eagle rank is nationally recognized as the highest attribute to a young man's character and dedication and exemplifies the goals and ideals of scouting and service to community, to nation, and to the world. Best wishes on your future endeavors in life and your scouting future. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand to cause the seal of the city of Williamsburg, Virginia, to be affixed this 14th day of June, 2018, and it's signed by me as the mayor. And may I just add, what a fitting day to be able to recognize this young man. What better day than Flag Day? So, Tom, thanks so much. I now have the privilege of awarding the 2018 Williamsburg Business Appreciation Award. Jennifer, please come forward. Do we have any members of the EDA here? Okay. Anybody else? This is and I just want to say this is an award that's given out each year by the EDA. They accept nominations and they try to recognize businesses who have made a difference in this community, not only through what they do as a business, but through their contributions to the community through volunteer and through service. And today we are honoring, and they have a new name, and it is, got it here somewhere. Well, I don't know, you guys keep changing them. We're just going to call it Quirks for now. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we have the privilege and pleasure of presenting the 2018 Williamsburg Business Appreciation Award, and this year's recipient, Jennifer Raines and her team at Quirks, handcrafted goods and unique gifts. Now, for any of you who have lived in Williamsburg for any length of time, this name might be a bit confusing, but that is only because of Jennifer's long-standing tenure as an independent small business owner in our community. Going back some 13 years, you may recall the predecessor, Kink's Quirks and Caffeine in the Colony Square Shopping Center, which Jennifer purchased. Fast forwarding to Jennifer's relocation into the city at High Street, we find Jennifer rebranding the business as Quirks of Art. I'll never forget that opening day because it was one of my first ribbon cuttings about 8 years ago. Never satisfied with the status quo and eager to be part of a reinvigorated downtown, Jennifer moved Quirks of Art to Prince George Street. I understand that was quite an opening celebration with Vice Mayor Scott Foster doing the ribbon cutting. Now, just this past spring, Jennifer has opened a second downtown location at the Sideshow at 221 North Boundary Street. I'm going to editorialize here for a moment. If you haven't been in there, you really have to go in. It's completely different than anything you've seen in Williamsburg or anything else. The circus theme is really cool, and it is a lot of fun. But at that last ribbon cutting, Doug Pons cut the ribbon. I doubt that we keep any such statistics, but it's quite possible, Jennifer, that you have set the record for the most ribbon cuttings in any 8-year period in the city. Despite all of the changes, one thing remains constant. Jennifer's shops always have been, and definitely still are, quirky. And that is what her customers love. In today's homogenized world, Quirks of Art and the Sideshow welcome oases of mirth and whimsy infused throughout with inspiration. And people outside of Williamsburg have taken note. In-Store magazine has named Quirks one of America's coolest stores. Jennifer is devoted to helping other women in the business world succeed, which helped her win the 2010 Women in Business Achievement Award. In the nomination for this Business Appreciation Award today, it was noted that 90% of the goods sold in Jennifer's stores are made in America. That's pretty tough to do anymore. And that she has received top retailer awards from both Niche Magazine and the Retail Alliance. Additionally, the nomination described the artfully beautiful website for Quirks that makes it easy for visiting customers who have already gone home empty-handed to correct the error of their ways and still make a purchase online. From spirit tiles to peace poles and everywhere in between, Quirks' handcrafted goods and unique gifts is sure to have something for everyone. Jennifer, on behalf of all my colleagues on City Council and the entire EDA and all the residents and visitors to this city, congratulations.
Thank you.
You don't want that close to me, I'm telling you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Freiling, all of City Council, and the Economic Development Authority. I'd like to introduce Odessa Dowdy. Odessa is one of my many sidekicks, and I would not be here today if it weren't for so many people that supported me through the years, including my main squeeze, Steve Rose. It's a challenge to be in retail, but I'm determined to keep pushing through. So thank you for recognizing our achievements. And thank you for all of my staff that helps make everything we do possible. Thank you.
I think this is going to be used in a few minutes.
Bless you.
Okay, this takes us to our public hearings today, of which we have 6. The first is the consider approval of budget amendment for fiscal year 18, fourth quarter resolution 18-04. Ms. Dameron, will you be leading us through this?
Mayor Freiling and members of City Council, Resolution 18-4 appropriates funding from 7 grants in the General Fund totaling $10,645 and 3 grants in the Law Enforcement Block Grant totaling $35,029. These grants funded police equipment from asset forfeiture funds, enforcement of speed and intoxication violations from DMV grants, structural collapse school from a heavy technical rescue grant, and law enforcement specialty training and certification from the Burn Justice Assistant Grant.
Questions for Ms. Dameron?
No questions.
Open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to comment on this item, please come forward, state your name and address. Comments to 5 minutes? I don't think we have any speakers cards on this one. With that, I'll close the public hearing, come back to council for your comments, consideration.
I'll make a motion. Move the resolution 18-04 be approved consistent with the staff recommendation.
Second.
Ms. Flicka?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Motion passes. Takes us to our second, wow, Ms. Murphy,
She's
you're
ready.
quick. I'm going to turn the gavel over to Mr. Foster on this one. As an employee of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, it is inappropriate for me to participate in the discussion or vote on the matter at hand.
PCR 18-013 requested the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to amend the zoning ordinance to allow outdoor special events with a special use permit in the Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area District and PCR 18-014 requested the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for a special use permit to hold the Summer Breeze Concert Series on the DeWitt Wallace Decorative Art Museum lawn located at 326 West Francis Street in the Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area. Carolyn Murphy, take it away.
Ready. Vice Mayor Foster and members of City Council, this is a request of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to relocate the Summer Breeze concerts from the Duke of Gloucester Street to the lawn of the DeWitt Wallace Decorative Art Museums. There are 2 parts to this request. The first part is a text change to allow outdoor special events as a special use in the Colonial Williamsburg Historic District CW. Since the proposed use will be located in the CW Historic District and the use is not of a historic nature, the proposal is to add outdoor special events as a special use permit in this district. I included in my memo the special use permit requirements. The second part of the request is a request for a special use permit to allow the Summer Breeze concerts at this location for 16 weeks starting June the 6th. As noted in my memo, the Foundation is expanding the concert series from 8 to 16 weeks and will extend the hours from 6 to 9 instead of 7 to 9. The proposal is to install a 30 by 30 tent with a stage and fencing on the lawn as shown in the overhead. The fence, smaller tents, sponsorship signage will be removed weekly. The applicant proposes to install a large tent and stage to remain up for the 16 weeks, except the tent and stage will be removed for the Funhouse Fest and will be reinstalled for the remainder of the summer concerts after the Funhouse Fest. The applicant proposes signage on the tent, temporary signage on the fence advertising sponsors of the event, and a freestanding sign with the concert schedule on the front with bathroom locations on the rear of the sign. A 12 square foot freestanding sign is allowed, and one 32 square foot sign on each street is allowed on the tent. The request has been reviewed by staff, and 2 bathroom locations at the shops on Henry Street and adjacent to the ticket office on Henry Street will meet code requirements. The fire department has requested weekly inspections of the stage and tent to ensure the fire code and safety requirements are met. Parking for the concerts will be provided across South Henry Street in P6 and across Francis Street in P4, along with other parking lots in Merchant Square. Culture Fix will coordinate food and beverage service, concert oversight, and security for the concerts. The applicant notes the event is being relocated to enlarge the venue and has the full support of the Merchant Square Association Marketing Committee. Planning Commission held a public hearing on May the 23rd. Other than the applicant, no one spoke at the hearing. Planning Commission recommends to City Council approval of PCR 18-013 as outlined in proposed ordinance 18-02 by adding outdoor special events with a special use permit to the CW Historic District. And Planning Commission also recommended approval of the special use permit PCR 18-014 with 5 conditions as outlined in my memo. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Jeff Duncan, the applicant, and Steve Rose with Culture Fix are also present if you have any questions of them.
Ramsey, any questions?
The only question I have is something that has come up, I think, in various comments, and I think it might be worthwhile to clarify, is that food and non-alcoholic beverages are still allowed, and I think there's been some questions about that, and just want to be sure everyone realizes that they can still take their picnics and things like that.
You can still take your picnic and food into the area, the fenced-in area, but all alcoholic beverages have to be purchased from the tents and locations inside the fenced area. You can't bring your outside alcoholic beverages into the tent area.
But if you want to take water or lemonade or iced tea or anything like
That's
that,
correct.
you can still do that as well.
Yes.
So I have some comments later, but that was the only clarification I wanted to be made for everyone.
Questions? No
Any?
questions.
All right. No further questions. We'll open the public hearing. Do you have any speaker cards on this? No. Anyone who wants to speak on this matter, now's your time. Seeing no rush to the podium, we'll close the public hearing. Come back for additional comments.
Well, the only comments I want to say is that I have been a strong proponent of Summer Breeze concerts over the years and have spent many a nice summer evening, Wednesday evening on Merchant Square, and I had a few misgivings about the move, but I think they have all been taken care of over the last 2 weeks. And for those who haven't been out to hear the great bands that have been booked for the summer, I hope you will. And one thing that struck me is that it really creates a great picnic atmosphere and sort of a throwback to the days of community gatherings. And we used to load up our car with our chairs and picnic basket and all different kinds of things and drive 3 blocks so we could park and not have to carry all of that with us. And actually having the food and beverage opportunities there, we just take a chair. And I will commend the selection of food and beverages at the events, and I think the prices are very reasonable, and basically I haven't heard any comments. I also like having the stage up because I think it lets people know that there's something that's going to be happening there on a consistent basis. And as the word spreads, it just creates another great opportunity for residents and for tourists to have something to do on a Wednesday. And maybe we'll keep getting the same great weather we've had the past 2 weeks because of the move. So thank you. I fully support the request.
I would echo all of that. I think, for years we've been talking about downtown vibrancy and making sure that the center of Williamsburg remains that cultural epicenter where there's activities going on. And so I commend Colonial Williamsburg for having the vision to use the lawn for Fun Fest originally and the other event with the bikes that I think Steve was a part of, and now this. It's a great venue. It's a great backdrop. It's really is an enhancement to just the cultural arts that Williamsburg is really driving as another destination driver, and I think it's a good use for the property and look forward to supporting it.
I had a couple comments and observations, and mostly my comments are in line with and echo the points already made by Mr. Pons and Ms. Ramsey. But I think one of the things I've remembered as a student was always driving by that huge lawn outside, and I was always thinking we could do so much with that space. You see it in the city of Richmond, you see it in Asheville and Charleston, and I think this is the Summer Breeze concert series is one of those examples and illustrations of the path forward in imagining that space. And I hope that we can continue to work with our partners over at Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to to move forward with more events and creative, imaginative uses of the space as we continue our downtown vibrancy conversations. And the second one, I had gotten clarification from Ms. Shelton. I had asked previously about why the outdoor special events wasn't defined within the zoning ordinance. And the response is that the special use permitting process will create a fairly rigorous indication of what that special event may be. So it will allow for public input whenever some sort of special event is proposed through the planning and through the city council board. So I think that's sufficient and to keep it that broad, and I think I'm excited to see what will come out of it. And I want just to commend Mr. Jeff Duncan and also Steve Rose for your visions in using this space again. So thank you very much.
I think this is a great example of city staff, city government responding to the creativity of the public. We're activating another important core of downtown that had previously been dormant. Steve Rose with the Merchant Square and the Merchant Square Association brought us this idea. It didn't fit into our system in the way it should. Planning Commission held a special meeting to make sure this could be done in time, and we're here with a really good product, and I appreciate the flexibility on everyone's part to make this happen. So, anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve the proposed ordinance number 18-2 for the text change to allow outdoor special events in the Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area CW with special use permit as recommended by Planning Commission.
Second.
Ms. Ramsey has it. Ms. Flicko, will you call the roll?
Mr. Zing?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
This takes us to our third.
We got one more
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
Second motion?
I move approval of PCR number 18-014 for a special use permit to hold the Summer Breeze concerts on the DeWitt Wallace Decorative Art Museum lawn located at 326 West Francis Street in the Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area, CW, with the 5 conditions recommended by Planning Commission.
Second.
Second.
Ms. Flicko?
Mr. Zing?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Now you get your little hammer back.
It's precious to me. This takes us to PCR 18-010, request of Williamsburg, James City County Public Schools for a special use permit to extend the temporary classroom trailer at Matthew Whaley School at 301 Scotland Street until 2022. Ms. Burke?
Good afternoon. The Williamsburg James City County Public Schools is requesting a 4-year extension to the special use permit authorized on March 13, 2014 by City Council to place a double-wide classroom trailer containing 2 classrooms at Matthew Whaley School, 301 Scotland Street, through July 2022. The application states that the current enrollment is at 480 students, currently 98% of the 490 student capacity. I recently requested a clarification on that point and was told that the trailers are not used to calculate capacity. However, the school is expected to be over capacity next year. The classroom trailer was approved in March 2014 for a period lasting until July 31, 2018, and the history of previous approvals was included in your packages. This property is located in the downtown planning area of the 2013 Comprehensive Plan and is designated as public semi-public, which includes, among other uses, government facilities, public and private schools. This property is zoned Single-Family Dwelling District, RS3. The Single-Family Dwelling District, RS3, allows with a special use permit public or private elementary, middle, and high schools. The Architectural Review Board reviewed and approved the classroom trailer as designed and its design at its meeting on January 14, 2014. And the Site Plan Review Committee did not meet to review this matter as it was their consensus the use and location continues to be suitable for this site. The applicant proposes a 4-year extension to the special use permit authorized on March 13, 2014 as PCR 14-002 by City Council to place a double-wide classroom trailer containing the 2 classrooms at Matthew Whaley School. They're requesting this 4-year extension through July of 2022. The applicant is not proposing to make any current changes to the layout, and as the school is currently at 98% capacity, making the continued use of this classroom trailer is a necessity. The public hearing was held on May 16th by the Planning Commission, and no one spoke at the Planning Commission. They voted unanimously to recommend to City Council that the special use permit be approved to allow the double-wide classroom trailer containing 2 classrooms at Matthew Whaley School, 301 Scotland Street, to remain through July of 2022. I'm available if you have any questions, and Mr. Snipes is here as well from the school if you have questions for him.
Questions from Ms. Burke?
Just to make, I had, prior to reading this memo, I misunderstood that they were adding trailers. This is just a continuing permit for the one that already exists.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I have no questions.
No question.
Just curious, why did the applicant choose 2022 as the end date? Is it just a...
I believe it was because we did a 4-year approval last time, and so they're requesting another 4-year approval.
Any
this time.
rationale with that? Was that supposed to forecast redistricting or?
Not sure.
particular
We'll
school
have to ask for clarification from that.
Welcome.
My name is Marcellus Snipes. I'm the Senior Director for Operations for the school system. And excuse my attire today, as we've been running around, as you can tell. So good afternoon, Mayor Freiling, Vice Mayor, and Council. The question entailed, was there any kind of discussions about redistricting? No, there has been no discussions.
Or just
about
why it would be at 2022?
Again, as she stated, because we asked for a 4-year extension before. Our projection levels remain at about 1% off or on target. So we are projecting that the school will remain over capacity over the next 4 years. What is done during that time depends on programming as well as if we decide to redistrict.
Thank you.
While Mr. Sipes is here, any other questions for him? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to address council on this matter, please come forward. Seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for comment.
No comment. Ready to approve this.
I'm ready to approve it as well.
Just, I guess, a comment. You know, we obviously, most of us were here when we approved this back in 2014, but trailers aren't a new thing at schools, and I think sometimes there's a stigma attached to it. But having been in a trailer when I was in school, and then my kids, went to local school system and participated in trailers, and it still is a quality learning opportunity. I don't think there's any downside to it. Might have to walk in the rain, but in additionally, at the last school liaison meeting, we talked about security, and I think the school system does a good job to make sure that trailers have all the security in place that they would if they were inside the school building proper. So I don't have any problems with this. And ultimately, we would like not to have to use them, but it's a very expensive proposition to try to build another school, as we all know. So.
Piggyback off Ms. Pons' comment, first I just want to extend a quick appreciation to Mr. Marcellus Snipes and Michael, the head custodian there. I had a chance to visit these learning cottages, as the school system likes to call it, and because I had been just a city resident at the time that this was approved the first time around, and I've never been in one of them. And I've got to say, kind of based on what you've said, those learning cottages are really nice inside. They're top quality, and it seems to be regularly maintained by the custodial staff. So deep appreciation to the school system staff for that as well. And policy rationale is fine, and I'm fine approving this as well.
Yeah, I can't say I'm quite as enthusiastic about learning cottages as you might be. My kids have gone through both Matthew Whaley and Berkeley and gone through trailers, and it's not the same as having a classroom inside. But as Mr. Pons pointed out, our alternatives are either to find the funds to build another school, which at this point isn't realistic, and secondly, to redistrict families out of Matthew Whaley. And I would bet if you polled the Matthew Whaley community, every one of them would say, let's keep the trailers and not redistrict and move some people out, because that would be a dreadful process. But Ms. Shelton, can you remind us, we're really just talking about this from a land use standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing in that regard is, probably ask everybody in this room, how many times do you drive by Matthew Whaley in a month, and do you even notice that trailer out there? I mean, I drive by it multiple times a day, and I don't even see it. So from that standpoint, I don't think it's a detraction on the community. So With that, take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approval of PCR 18-010 to allow the existing classroom trailer at Matthew Willey School at 301 Scotland Street to remain until 2022 as recommended by Planning Commission.
Second.
Would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Takes us to our fourth public hearing, Cox franchise agreement. Ms. Shelton, anything you'd like to share with us?
I want to preface this, and this is going to apply to this public hearing and also the next public hearing. Over the course of the last two General Assembly sessions, we've had bills that have effectively removed the ability of localities to enact meaningful zoning with respect to wireless facilities. The city has been able to retain some degree of control over at least our rights of way with respect to these facilities by a lot of discussion with staff and by a willingness to attempt to cooperate with wireless facilities and wireless companies to find other places for them to be besides sticking ugly wooden power poles in our rights of way. So these two agreements are the culmination of the first two discussions that we've had with respect to trying to find creative ways that provide the city with the most control and flexibility over where these facilities are located. So the first one of these is with Cox. Cox has requested a franchise agreement to place poles within the city's rights of way to accommodate small cell facilities on the pole. Each one of these poles can hold at least 2 small cell facilities. In this right-of-way agreement, this franchise agreement, the city has absolute control over where these poles are located, and we can deny them for any reason with respect to the aesthetics, the location, their location in the right-of-way, their height, or any other consideration. So that's about the maximum flexibility that we can build into a franchise agreement. This agreement is for 8 years, which brings it into conformity with the existing Cox franchise agreement for their cable services. So the next time we revisit these franchise agreements, we will revisit them together, and the staff felt like there were efficiencies with doing that. It provides for each site within our right-of-way is a $1,000 right-of-way fee per year paid to the city. Each small cell co-located on a city pole, city-owned pole, is $200 a year. Again, this is allowing some flexibility for installing these facilities which are coming to our jurisdiction, whether we want them or not, accommodating 5G networks to be built within the city in the most flexible and aesthetically sensitive way that we can accommodate that. They are not permitted within the historic area, and that's consistent with every other franchise that we have in the city. So the process now is to open the public hearing for purposes of receiving bids. And if council feels like it's appropriate to adopt the franchise agreement, then council would need to make that motion and adopt that.
Questions from Ms. Shelton?
None.
Okay.
I had one, when the city negotiated with Cox, how did they come up with the $1,000 rate? Was that consistent with what we charge?
It's consistent with what the state code requires for the state.
Oh, requires, okay. There you
We don't
go.
get a lot of flexibility.
Nope. And in terms of approval, is that administrative approval? So this will be the city manager if the proposals
That's
will come
correct.
up?
This is the overarching approval from city council to allow the poles to be placed.
Mm-hmm.
Each and every pole that's put in our right-of-way or any other facility put in our right-of-way has to be approved by the city staff and in particular the city manager.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will open this is the public hearing on the Cox franchise agreement. I do have one speaker's card, but before I call that name, I'd just like to invite any other bids to come forward. Okay, with that, Mr. Sutton, did you want to speak on this? So, John Sutton, 307 Indian Springs Road. Welcome, sir.
Hello. I have concerns about 5G, and I'm not sure I'm addressing my concerns. I heard you mention, Shelton, that the right-of-way, but I'm more concerned about 5G antennas installed throughout neighborhoods. Is this part of the same Cox proposal or not?
It would open up the city's rights of way throughout the city, but the city manager would have to approve a particular location. If that were located in a neighborhood, that would be of concern to the city manager.
And you talked about historic districts are exempt or get special consideration. How about if you're in historic neighborhoods, like Indian Springs is?
Absolutely, Mr. Sutton. That's something that we would consider as well as we review the applications. I think any concern of the neighborhood would be a concern of the city. So the purpose of this legislation and the city's effort in Richmond over the year to try and get to this point was to make sure that we were able to protect those things that we consider valuable, and certainly our neighborhoods are one of those.
I have seen some information about the proposed installations throughout neighborhoods where there is going to be one antenna for every 2 houses or up to 10 houses. They will be clustered throughout the neighborhood. And to me, it harkens back to the days when people had over-the-air antennas on their roofs, and some neighborhoods don't have poles to put on, so it looks like they're going to have to involve pole installations. And besides, they say that there's small antennas for each few houses, but then there's going to be conduit, and there's going to be a lot of associated equipment with these to furnish the signal to the transmitters. And I think if you're going to make a public notice about this, it ought to be including all the potential for people to understand what they need to come to city council for, things that they need to consider. Understand that if there's no poles, if it's in a business district, they're going to be allowed to install them on the side of buildings. And just think about the buildings and commercial districts around here, not historic Williamsburg, but anywhere else. You'll see these antennas popping up on certainly every single building around. So this is a big deal, and I hope you all really take it seriously and guide the public along to understanding what can happen in Williamsburg. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. Would anybody else like to address council on this issue? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for comments and questions. Ms. Shelton, may I ask you a question first? What choice do we have here?
You do not have to grant this franchise. We are not obligated to provide a franchise for Cox to put poles in. The staff recommendation is that you do this because it clusters some of the antennas on the same poles, and it gives us the maximum amount of control over how those things are installed in the city's rights of way, and where they are installed in the right of way, and what they look like in the right of way. We have an exception in the state code right now for poles, and all of these poles that we're talking about are less than 50 feet. We think we need to make a good faith effort to do what we said that we would do when we were discussing this with the cell phone providers, that we will try to accommodate the facilities in a way that is aesthetically sensitive to the city and appropriate for the city, which is a very unique place. And so I think staff very much has in mind to make sure that this is done in a way that is done in harmony with what is in the city right now and appropriate in the locations that they're proposed.
And what would the potential franchisee do if, what option do they have if we do not adopt this franchise agreement?
None.
Okay. Other discussion?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is make the best of the situation, as I understand it, because 5G is coming, and a lot of the reason for the legislation going forward was to try to increase broadband service throughout the state of Virginia. And it's one of those things where we may not like what the future brings us, but when it's here, it's going to keep intruding, so to speak. And so I think that by doing what we can as working with the providers, that we're better off than not doing anything.
No, it is kind of counterintuitive to all the efforts that we've made to put power lines underground and limit poles, but I think given the technology, you have to have it. And I think in order for us to keep up with the technology and be able to have Cox offer to the residents, that level of service, it's a necessary evil. I do think, as Mr. Trivett says, we'll be very sensitive to the neighborhoods. That is a critical element of what I think we all do every day here, is to try to make sure that this is a livable, workable city, and part of that livable is workable, and we have to have access to internet and high speeds. And gosh, who knows what the future looks like in terms of technology? Maybe the poles will start to come down in short order. It was only 15 years ago, we only had dial-up. And so, this is an industry that's evolving very quickly. And so I suspect it'll be different in another 15 years.
This agreement is a snapshot of the larger discussions on the statewide level among localities in Virginia and with 5G cellular companies. There were some legislations that I recall that were proposed few years ago that would have given a blanket sweeping order, imposed one-size-fits-all regulation on all Virginia localities, and that was a nightmare. And at the time, Mr. Trivett was up in Richmond to lobby for the city's behalf, and our partners in Virginia Municipal League also ensured that wasn't to come to fruition. But in reflecting, and these discussions are continuing to happen. So for those who are concerned, I would also implore for those folks who are interested to get involved on the statewide level, because a lot of that will come down from the state legislature and the governor's signature ultimately. And I think what we have today seems reasonable. I think in terms of administrative review from the city manager, I think that respects the local zoning considerations and the unique historic nature that we have in the city. I just can't help but look back in hindsight what could have happened with some of the regulations from the state and the potential fallout from there. Just one quick question for Ms. Shelton. If the administrator denies one of the poll locations, do they have an appeal process? I mean, what does that look like?
No, there's no appeal process.
Okay. Thank you.
What extent is this technology already here? I mean, I've seen these oddly shaped antennas on existing poles.
I can't tell you if we have anything in the city particularly. I see it around. It's
right
here. So some of them are larger, some of them are a cylinder about this big that fits on top of a traffic pole, and you don't notice them because they're just a little heads up over the traffic signals and about that long. So it's here, and obviously last year City Council approved the small cell language that came into the city code, which allows it with administrative approval on private property. Of course, today we're not talking about private property, we're talking about city property.
And just to add to that, I think to Mr. Pons' point, 2 years ago when this legislation really first started cooking at the General Assembly level, we were talking about boxes the size of dorm room refrigerators.
Right.
And we've come so far with the technology before even some of the first ones are put up in a lot of communities, at least in the state of Virginia, that we've gone from that dorm room refrigerator box to some that are the size of your fist. So, who knows by the time we start really looking at putting up infrastructure inside the city, what size these types of units will be and what type of connectivity they will need to function.
And just to clarify, neither for Cox or for AT&T have they proposed to us any particular site at this point. What they are looking for is approval from City Council so they can then start planning where they want to put these. With respect to Cox, they're not actually they're going to have the small cells on the pole, but they're going to be doing that for other providers. And so giving them one more place to put the system that isn't another provider coming in and asking to put another pole up in the right-of-way is a good thing.
I'm done.
So, and I think Mr. Pons touched on this, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there's a service quality level here. It's important for the residents, it's important for the business community, it's also important for students. The amount of work that young people do today from home, seen it in my house, it requires a fair amount of speed and volume and access. So I'm not a big fan of this, but I don't see it as not the end of the world as we know it, and I'd much rather be working with the Cox folks and the folks from AT&T cooperatively on finding a solution that works for everybody and provides the service rather than fighting against them. And we learned a lesson through Airbnb, which we're going to have to apply in the coming months, that if we become too restrictive, there's a very good chance that the rules could change based upon the General Assembly's reaction to our resistance. And I don't think we want to get to the point where, as Mr. Zhang noted, if it goes out of our hands, the reality could be much different and much less desirable.
On that note, I move that the City Council approve proposed ordinance number 18-03.
Second.
Mayor, Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Now we come to the AT&T agreement. Again, I'll open the public hearing if anybody else would like to address council on this, or if there are anybody who'd like to provide an alternative bid. Seeing no one, I'll close public hearing, come back to council.
Mayor, if I could just brief you on this particular agreement.
Please.
So AT&T has requested, instead of a franchise where they're installing poles, they have requested to be able to co-locate on existing city facilities. And so this agreement provides the list of city facilities that they are allowed to locate on. They, of course, cannot interfere with city operations and co-locating on the city sites. Again, the rent is $200 per year per site. They have to go ahead and complete the administrative approval process for small cells as part of each application. And this agreement is for a period of 10 years with 2 possible 5-year renewals.
Questions?
Does the city inspect these small cells, wireless things from time to time, or is it just kind of, that's a rental agreement and they just install it?
Well, the agreement gives us the right to do inspections of these, in particular the ones that are located on city property,
Gotcha.
on city structures.
Sounds good to me.
Do I have a motion?
Yes. I move that City Council approve and authorize the city manager to execute a lease with New Singular Wireless for the installation of small cell facilities on city-owned structures.
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
This takes us to our last public hearing, which is PCR 18-011, request of Holly Hills LLC to rezone 6.84 acres at 200 Brookwood Drive from RM1 conditional to RM1. It says conditional twice on here, but Ms. Murphy?
Mayor Freiling and members of City Council, this is a request by Holly Hills LLC to rezone 6.8 acres at Brookwood Drive from RM1 conditional with proffers to RM1 conditional with proffers. The current RM1 conditional zoning proffers limits the number of units allowed to 20 or less and requires the owner to pay $3,000 per lot towards the construction of the sidewalk from Jamestown Road to the carriage homes. In this request, the applicant is proposing to be relieved of the previous proffer that limits the number of residential units to 20 and proposes the density allowed in the RM1 zoning district, which is 8 units per net developable acre. With 4.8 net developable acres, that would allow up to 38 dwelling units on the property if the rezoning request was approved. The applicant also proffers a cash payment in the amount of $60,000 to the city within 30 days of the issuance of a land disturbing permit for the sidewalk that was constructed by the city from Jamestown Road to the carriage homes instead of $3,000 per lot, as previously proffered. The 2013 comp plan designates this property as medium-density multifamily residential land use. Chapter 8 in the 2013 comp plan recommends the existing medium-density multifamily residential land use at 8 dwelling units per net acre for this area and should be implemented by the RM1 multifamily dwelling district. This property is zoned RM1 conditional, and I included in my memo the statement of intent for that district. For some background, this parcel was zoned Residence District A, single family, when the property was annexed into the city in 1984. Following the adoption of the 1989 comp plan, the zoning was changed to RM1 multifamily dwelling district, 8 dwelling units per net acre in 1991. In 1997, in conjunction with an amendment to the 1989 comp plan, the zoning was changed at the request of McHale Development Corporation to LBR, which is Limited Business Residential District. This district allowed single-family and duplex dwellings by right, with multifamily and townhouse units requiring a special use permit. As part of the implementation of the 1998 comp plan, this area was rezoned to the new LB4 district, which did not allow residential use. In 2004, a site plan was approved for 4 office buildings totaling 40,000 square feet of office space with 200 parking spaces. The 2006 comp plan designates this property as office land use, and a site plan was approved in 2006 for 7 office buildings totaling 22,652 square feet and 200 parking spaces. In 2007, McHale Development Corporation requested a rezoning from LB4 to RM1 to permit development of a duplex townhome project comparable to the adjacent carriage homes. Staff recommended denial of the request because it did not comply with the 2006 comp plan. After discussions at Planning Commission and City Council, the property was rezoned in 2008 with proffers that limit the number of dwelling units to not more than 20, with a cash contribution of $3,000 per lot for the sidewalk construction. The 2013 comp plan designates this property as medium-density multifamily residential land use with a maximum density of 8 dwelling units per net acre and is implemented by the RM1 multifamily dwelling district. In the RM1 zoning district, single-family, duplex dwellings, and townhomes are allowed by right. Multifamily dwellings, including apartments, require a special use permit. This property is currently zoned RM1 conditional, which limits the number of dwelling units to 20 because of the proffer and requires a $3,000 per dwelling unit, totaling $60,000 towards the sidewalk improvements made from Route 199 to the carriage homes. This application is for a rezoning of the property from RM1 conditional with those proffers that the applicant shall make the cash payment in the amount of $60,000 to the city within 30 days of the issuance of a land disturbance permit for reimbursement to the city for the sidewalk previously constructed by the city from Jamestown Road to the carriage homes, and removes the 20-unit maximum as previously proffered. The city engineer has reviewed the request and notes that previous plans contain more traffic volume than the proposed 38 residential units, and concludes Brookwood Drive and the traffic light at Route 199 can handle the 38 potential residential units on this property. The existing stormwater management facility was designed to handle runoff from the carriage home property, this property, and property located across Route 199 that drains into the pond. Utilities are also available to the site. The images submitted indicating a townhome layout has not been proffered and has not been reviewed by staff. If the rezoning to RM1 conditional is approved, the applicant would need to meet ordinance requirements for development of the property, which requires Planning Commission approval, and before a site plan or subdivision can be approved, the Architectural Review Board must approve the buildings, structures, and exterior architectural features, since the property is located in the Corridor Protection District. The property is not located in an archaeological protection district. Planning Commission held a public hearing on May the 16th. The applicant's attorney and 11 individuals spoke at the hearing. Planning Commission recommended to City Council approval of the rezoning request with proffers to rezone the property from multifamily dwelling district RM1 conditional with proffers to multifamily dwelling district RM1 conditional with revised proffers. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant and the applicant's attorneys, Dan Quarles, is also present if you have any questions of them.
Questions for Ms. Murphy?
None right now. Thank you.
The only question I have is in regarding to the BMP, I think that's what the pond is, and you said that when it was built, it was to take care of the carriage homes across 199 in this property. And sort of what density was it built for?
Well, the
for this?
BMP is usually designed for the amount of impervious area. So they design it for a certain amount of impervious area. So when a application comes in for development, you would then compare the existing carriage homes requirement to the new development and to what is already existing across Route 199 and determine if the existing one needs additional capacity or if they need to do additional requirements on site.
But it's been determined that this one in this size would accommodate the 38 townhouses?
It accommodated the office complex at the time, and the office complex is very similar to the development of what's proposed in that sketch drawing that was shown. But like I said, when the plan comes in, we will compare that to the capacity of the pond, and if it's can take that. If not, they would have to either enlarge the pond or do site work on their
So that's really part of the site plan review process?
That's correct. The site plan or subdivision.
And I think you said, too, that if this was approved, one of the first, boards that they would have to go to for approval would be the ARB, correct?
That's correct. Before a site plan would be approved, they would have to get approval from the Architectural Review Board for the design of the buildings.
And not only the design, but also for the materials and to be sure that they were complementary to the other buildings in the neighborhood.
That's part of the Architectural Review Board approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Back off of Barb's question. Who maintains the BMP? Holly Hills Carriage Home maintains the BMP now?
Currently, since they're the only one using the pond, they are maintaining the BMP. It's my understanding from the developer that they have rights to use the BMP. If they developed on their property, then there has to be some agreement between them and the new development on who pays what portion of the maintenance for the BMP. And that's all done too also with the site plan review. We would have to have agreement and maintenance agreements done over for that.
In terms of density, the 6+ acres, what we're talking about is giving them a density of 8 units per acre, which is the same as what the Holly Hills Carriage Homes has. Is that correct?
They're zoned the same.
Yep.
So under that zoning classification, you can have up to 8 dwelling units per net developable acre, not the gross acreage, net developable. So that's what they're showing, 4.8 net developable acres, which gives you the 38. The difference between the two projects can be one project is a duplex development, and the reason they don't approach the 8 dwelling units per net acre, the lot width and sizes are different for duplexes than they are for townhouses. So you can usually get a little more in a townhouse development than you could in a duplex development or a single family development.
So the carriage homes, I think I heard the other day when I met with the neighborhood, are at a 5.4 acre or units
Somewhere
per
in that
acre.
neighborhood, yes.
That wasn't driven by any policy other than the developer's desire to build the type of units and set the lot sizes that they did.
That's correct. Okay. It's based on their ordinance requirements for the lot sizes and the type of buildings you put on the property.
Thank you.
Kind of to add on to, and thanks for your presentation, Carolyn, as always. First question, just kind of to piggyback off Ms. Ramsey's earlier question to you before with the ARB process. Can you walk us through a little bit more, depending on what happens today, if it gets approved, the applicant will have to submit site plans that's made available for public viewing at the municipal office building, right? And then you can find the schedule and the application online to follow that, and they're able to provide, are they able to provide input during the
Yes.
ARB meeting?
What would happen, whether this is approved or if they come in under the existing 20 units?
Right.
If it's a site plan, it requires planning commission approval, and as part of that planning commission approval, the applicant would have to get architectural review board approval. If it's a subdivision, it's basically staff approval, but under the site plan, they would have to submit their drawings for the architectural review board. That includes all the elevations, all the materials, all the colors. The notice of the green sign would go back up. The ARB meets twice a month, whatever meeting they go to. They also hold a public comment section for each of the cases. So if the case was up for ARB at the next meeting, the chair usually says, this case is up, and asks for any comment after discussion. So the public could come and comment at that time. And then the architectural review board makes their decision. If they recommend approval or approval with conditions, then it can be forwarded on to Planning Commission for their review and approval. And once Planning Commission makes a decision, usually for approval, if it's something allowed by right, you meet the ordinance requirements, then they could get their permits for construction, land disturbance permit, and building permits.
Thank you for that. And in terms of the proffer for that $60,000, I'm just kind of curious, does that all have to be spent for one particular project, or could the money be split in many different ways for multiple projects, subject to whatever city approval that might be?
The proffer was for the construction at that time, the first one,
Right.
for the construction of the sidewalk along Jamestown Road.
Sure.
And we're at 199 to the development. So the city spent funds for that.
Right.
So the applicant is proposing to give the city that $60,000 that the city was looking towards, putting towards that construction cost, even though we've already paid for it.
And if that were to change, or if there's any amendment to that, that would just have to follow through your approval process, or does it has to go back to?
No, I think the proffer is for the $60,000 to go towards the construction of
that sidewalk. Okay.
the already sidewalk constructed by the city,
Right,
as
okay,
the proffer is shown in the application.
Gotcha. I was just
So
kind of curious.
basically, it would go, at this point, it would be
Yes.
reimbursing the city, going back into the
That's right.
reserves, potentially,
Right.
to be
Could be
used
used for
for
other
future
projects.
CIP projects, but it's a policy decision that
Right.
we or a future council will make as to how that money's eventually
Okay.
spent. And it won't be put in a little lockbox and
That's
save
right.
somewhere.
Yeah.
It just
No,
goes to
no,
general.
I know. Sure. Okay.
And to piggyback on that, when driving past there, I noticed that the sidewalk doesn't come all the way up to Brookwood.
That's correct.
Is there any plan to continue that sidewalk?
We could look at that as part of the development of this site, but currently it comes back then to what was agreed to by the city and the developer was the construction from Route 199 from Jamestown into the carriage homes. And then, of course, inside the carriage homes, there are also public sidewalks that connect all the way back out to this property.
Okay, because there's a little section there where there's nothing right now. Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Ms. Murphy? Okay. We'll now move on to the public hearing. First, ask the applicant if he'd like to make some comments. And then I have, after that, 4 speakers cards that we will get to.
Ms. Mayor, before you start, are we able to ask questions to the applicant, or do we have to wait?
I think what we should do is hear what everybody has to say. I mean, if you have something immediately, or I prefer we just hear all the speakers and then come back with questions.
That's fine. Yeah, just curious.
Welcome, Mr. Quarles.
Welcome. Good afternoon, Mayor Freiling and members of council. My name is Dan Quarles. I represent the applicant Holly Hills. With me here this afternoon as a representative of Holly Hills is John Kale. John's father, Hatcher, is the principal of Holly Hills. He is a developer with long ties to the peninsula dating back several decades. He has a history and reputation for high-quality projects, including here in the city of Williamsburg, Holly Hills single-family homes and Holly Hills carriage homes. And Mr. Kale and Holly Hills at this point would like to move forward with another high-quality project at this parcel, specifically a townhouse project. And the desire to move forward with the townhouse project at this parcel at this time has led to this rezoning request. The rezoning request is one that is fairly simple. It's just to be relieved of this one proffer that has been discussed. We hope that you think that it is a reasonable request. It's a request that the staff has recommended approval of, and that Planning Commission almost unanimously has recommended approval of. With respect to the area where this parcel is located, the 2013 comp plan designates that this area should be medium-density multifamily residential land use, implemented by the RM1 zoning district. RM1 zoning permits 8 units per net developable acre and permits townhouses by right. The other neighborhoods in this area, including Village Green, Woodlands condominiums, Holly Hills carriage homes, all have that RM1 zoning. If this parcel was zoned RM1, like its neighbors and as called for in the comp plan, the applicant would be able to build 38 townhomes by right. And there was some puzzlement at the Planning Commission level about the math that's involved. It's a 6.8 acre parcel, but you don't multiply 6.8 by 8. You have to use the net developable acres. And here there are 4.8 net developable acres. Multiply that by 8 and you get 38.4. So they can do 38 townhomes if they are zoned RM1 without this limitation, like their neighbors. However, this property zoning currently includes this special condition limiting them to only 20 units. 20 units on 4.8 developable acres works out to only 4.1 units per net acre. So they're currently limited to only half the density that's recommended by the 2013 comp plan. And the developer is only asking at this point to be relieved of that 20 unit limitation. Doing so will have a twofold effect. First, it will conform the zoning for this property to the 2013 comp plan. Obviously, that would be a good thing. It will also enable Holly Hills to deliver a better product by achieving economies of scale as they build out and make this development and bring it into fruition through achieving economies of scale. I'm going to reiterate some of the zoning history that Ms. Murphy already covered for you, which is kind of important because from our perspective, this 20 unit limitation is kind of a historical accident, if you will. In 1984, this parcel was annexed into the city, and the first comp plan that came along after it was annexed was the 1989 comp plan. And that 1989 comp plan designated the parcel for RM1 zoning, and it was zoned accordingly shortly after the 1989 comp plan, without any 20-unit cap or limitation. In 1995, Mr. Kale and his partner acquired the parcel of land, and when I say the parcel of land, I'm actually talking about this approximately 8-acre parcel and the 15-acre parcel that is now Holly Hills Carriage Homes. At that time, it was just one large parcel that had not yet been subdivided. In 1997, Mr. Hale contemplated Holly Hills Carriage Homes on 15 acres of the parcel and an office park on this parcel. So in 1997, he requested a change in zoning for the 7 acres away from the RM1 designation to a designation that allowed non-residential use, and that rezoning request was granted. In 1997, a plat was recorded by McHale Development, splitting the larger parcel into the 15-acre site for Holly Hills Carriage Homes and the 7-acre parcel that's before you today. And that plat designated this parcel as the Holly Hills Office Park. Right after that rezoning in 1998, a new comp plan came out. And per the rezoning that had just happened, the comp plan followed what the city thought was going to be the facts on the ground and deemed this parcel intended for non-residential office use. Over the years, several office park site plans were approved. In 2004, a site plan was approved that would have allowed Holly Hills, or then McHale Development, to develop the site with 4 office buildings with 40,000 square feet of office space and 200 parking spaces. In 2006, another site plan was approved by the city, which provided for 7 office buildings with 22,652 square feet of office space and still 200 parking spaces. Going back to Ms. Ramsey's comment about the impervious surface, I feel for sure that if it could accommodate the runoff for that kind of site plan, that the site plan that we're talking about now, which is really a much less intensive use than what the developer could have proceeded with back at that time, I think the BMP is certainly going to be able to accommodate this less intensive use of the parcel. However, at the same time that these site plans were being put together by Mr. Kale and contemplated, at the same time, Holly Hills Carriage Homes was being built out. Holly Hills Carriage Homes, the lot started selling and being conveyed to their ultimate purchasers and occupiers beginning in 2000. And by the mid-2000s, Holly Hills Carriage Homes was pretty much built out. The carriage homes had sold very well and were a very popular item, and it had been a very successful project for Mr. Kale. So at that time, a light bulb came on over Mr. Kale's head, and it occurred to him that this property was better suited for residential use than office park use. And so he, on the realization that that was the highest and best use for the property, he sought to rezone the parcel back to RM1, the same as it had been 10 years before, the same as it had been 12 years earlier when he had acquired it, and the same that it had been designated by the comp plan back in 1989. The problem that he ran into was that because the comp plan had followed the rezoning from RM1 to office use designation, he was now faced with a situation where his request to go back to RM1 was against the comp plan, because the comp plan, based on his rezoning, provided for non-residential use. And because his request was contrary to the then existing comp plan, staff recommended against it. So as part of trying to get approval, Mr. Kale proffered a cap of 20 units as a concession. The 20-unit cap back in 2007 was not a problem, and that was because at that point in time it was Mr. Kale's intention to build 10 more carriage home duplexes for a total of 20 dwelling units. And that is about all that the site would accommodate. As was mentioned earlier, the carriage home is a larger product, and so that's all that the site could really conveniently accommodate. So when he made that proffer, and the proffer was that the 20-unit cap and also the $60,000 contribution, which today he's not asking to be relieved of, so that contribution will still be made once a land disturbing permit is issued. But the problem is the world has changed since 2007. Shortly after he sought the rezoning application and agreed to this proffer that limited him to 20 units, the Great Recession came in 2008. And that drastically changed the landscape for developers and projects like this one. Prior to the Great Recession, the carriage homes were selling for numbers in the 500,000s. As I stand here today, they're selling for prices in the 300,000s. At the same time that the prices fell from the Great Recession to now, building costs have gone up. And so those prices and construction costs don't meet somewhere where it's feasible or economically possible for Mr. Kale to build 10 more carriage home duplexes on this property. It's not feasible, and it's not something that can happen. So that brings us to the current time, and we now have to grapple with what is going to happen at this property. It's not going to be duplex carriage homes. It's going to be townhouses, and so the question is whether it will be 20 or 38. The Holly Hills townhouses, they're really ready to move forward with high-quality townhomes. And their research and the feedback that they're getting in the community is that there is a high demand for this product. The 2013 comp plan identifies the area as RM1. It allows townhomes by right. But because of this historical accident that resulted from Mr. Kale going down this office park path, he's stuck with the limitation of only 20 units. In developing the site, there are certain sunk costs. Infrastructure that has to go in, a road that has to go in, utilities that have to be installed, the $60,000 proffer that he's made. All those sunk costs are going to be the same regardless of whether they're 20 units or 38. By your allowing the additional 18 units, the developer can achieve some economies of scale. Those sunk costs get spread out over more units. These economies of scale increase the developer's margin, and that means that the developer can afford to invest more in the project and deliver a higher quality product and project at the end of the day. And because the property is actually designated by the comp plan as RM1, freeing up the developer to do this not only doesn't violate the comp plan, it actually carries it out. So recognizing that a lot of people could stand and say, hey, I achieve economies of scale if you give me more density. Here that request is being made to get to a density that the comp plan actually contemplates that he's going to have. So, importantly, it's important to understand that Holly Hills' goal is to deliver a high-quality product that's going to be a benefit to the city. Holly Hills' plan is for 1,800 square foot townhomes with a price point in the low 300,000s. Their plan contemplates fee simple ownership of the townhouses. They're going to sell them to people. That there's going to be a homeowner association to govern the neighborhood. There will be a declaration of restrictive covenants that binds the buyers of the townhouses. The Kales developed Holly Hills Carriage Homes. They developed Holly Hills. All those communities have restrictive covenants. And I would contemplate that the restrictive covenants that will be in place for the townhouses will have, as a starting point, the drafting will probably start from something very similar to what was originally in place there. I can't say that it will be completely similar to what is currently in place at Holly Hills Carriage Homes because they have amended theirs since the original days to place a more stringent limitation on the number of rentals that are allowed. I believe they only allow 5 of their 62 units to be rented at a time. And I can't represent that there will be such a limitation, that stringent a limitation on the townhouses. Now, to carry out this plan, 1,800 square foot townhouses that sell in the low 300s, the townhouses are going to have to be well appointed inside and out, and that is what Holly Hills' intention is to do. The plan is for a very nice townhome neighborhood, offering a product that is as nice as the carriage homes, but it's a different, smaller product. So it's not one that's going to compete with the Holly Hills carriage homes for sales or have a negative effect on their property values. During this process, there have been various issues raised in citizen comments, and I'd like to try to proactively address some of the concerns I think that you may hear from others. There have been traffic concerns that have been expressed. Your staff memo at page 5 states that the city engineer has reviewed the project and concluded that the intersection can accommodate 38 units on this parcel. Holly Hills' own engineers at Van Ness, Hang, and Bruslin have concluded the intersection could handle 67 townhouse units. They made that opinion back when we were approaching the city for RM2 zoning. As a practical matter, traffic going to and from this parcel doesn't actually pass through the Holly Hills Carriage Homes neighborhood. They're going to share a stoplight. I'm sure you've all been to the site. You're quite familiar. They're going to share the stoplight in the first maybe 100 feet or so of Brookwood Drive. There have been appearance concerns that have been raised. Another thing I would like to point out and note, this project is the final piece of Mr. Kale's work in Holly Hills. He developed Holly Hills. It's a beautiful neighborhood of single-family homes. He developed Holly Hills Carriage Homes. It's a beautiful neighborhood of duplexes, which the residents of the neighborhood clearly cherish and want to protect, rightly so. If allowed, this parcel will become a beautiful neighborhood of townhomes. There's no reason to believe that he's going to do anything different than, the best predictor of future events is someone's past work. And no one can point to some project that Mr. Kale has done that was anything other than top quality. Furthermore, this parcel is in the Corridor Protection District. The appearance of the townhouses must be submitted to and approved by ARB. As Mr. Zhang solicited from Ms. Murphy, that's a public process. It's one that all the residents of Holly Hills Carriage Homes will have an opportunity to participate in. They can review the plans that are submitted and they can make their input heard both to Mr. Kale and to the city. The Corridor Protection District will require the townhomes to complement and contribute to the existing scale and character of the corridor. That's language that comes straight out of the Corridor Protection District guidelines. The Corridor Protection District requires the exterior of the townhomes to be either wood, brick, or cementitious siding. So this review process does not leave room for some kind of slapdash townhouse project. So the appearance of the townhomes will be nice, number one, because they have to be, because the city's going to require it. But they're also going to be nice, number two, because the Kales want them to be nice. John Kale and his brother Jamie and their families and their children live right next door in Holly Hills. They live in the community. They're part of the community. They're residents of the community. They don't want to create a blight in the neighborhood right around the corner from their own homes. At Planning Commission, there were a number of speakers who were expressing preference. The townhouses have garages. At the point in time when we came to the Planning Commission, no determination had been made one way or another about whether there would or would not be garages. And I can say that I think that is still the case. But what I can say is that the Kales heard loud and clear what their neighbors were expressing as far as a preference for garages. They want the ARB process, if eventually they get there to have one, to not be contentious and to go smoothly. And so they're going to take those desires, and they have heard the residents along the way. We started with an apartment plan that was not one that made the neighbors happy. We took it off the table. So the Kales have been listening, and they've heard the preference for garages. And we'll take that into consideration, and the elevations may ultimately include garages. There have also been concerns raised about stormwater in this BMP. And it's right there on the screen. There's a 2-acre parcel between the Holly Hills parcel and the Holly Hills Carriage Homes with a stormwater detention facility, which is a fancy name for a retention pond, that was designed to handle the runoff for Holly Hills Carriage Home, this parcel, and some property that is across the street. Holly Hills Carriage Home has expressed concern about maintenance costs for that retention pond. There's a document recorded in the land records. It's titled Stormwater Detention Facilities Agreement and Deed of Easement that was recorded back in 1999. And that document will require the townhouse development to contribute to maintenance of the retention pond. The city is actually a party to that agreement, and city staff drafted the agreement. The city was a party to the agreement, as were the predecessors entitled to Holly Hills Carriage Homes and Holly Hills LLC. The obligation to abide by that agreement works much in the same way as the obligation to follow the declaration of restrictive covenants that govern Holly Hills Carriage Homes. You assume those obligations by acquiring title to the property. So the obligation to contribute to maintenance to the BMP already exists. The city has rights to enforce that if the townhomes for some reason did not comply, which there's no reason to think that they wouldn't. But the city has the right to enforce that agreement as a party to it. So in conclusion, I would request that you grant this rezoning and remove the 20-unit limit to make the parcel's density consistent with its historical zoning, dating all the way back to 1989, to make it consistent with the zoning that it had when Holly Hills, when Mr. Kale acquired it back in 1995, and to make it consistent with the zoning that it is designated to have under the 2013 comp plan. Doing so will enable Holly Hills to deliver another high-quality project, and one that is likely to be better and higher quality than if the request is not granted. If you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them for you. Steve Romeo from VHB is also here if you have any questions about the traffic or stormwater issues. And John Kale is also here and happy to address any questions that you may have of him.
Thank you, Mr. Quarles. Well, we'll come back to you with questions.
Okay. Thank you.
I think some other folks might be anxious to speak. So I'm going to go through the speakers' cards now. First, we have Pamela Legere, 173 Exmoor Court. Pam? Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor Freiling and members of City Council. I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to visit our neighborhood and meeting with our residents. I also want to thank Mr. Kale and Mr. Quarles for meeting with two of our board members, Mr. Zhang and me, this past Monday. In discussion with Mr. Kale regarding the townhomes, he stated he has heard our concerns and he's looking at adding garages, downstairs masters, hardwood floors, high-end kitchens, and with an estimated square footage of 1,800 to 2,100 square feet. I would prefer to see no more than 30 units instead of the proposed 38, and he's indicated that the engineer's site survey could possibly support a lower number than the proposed 38 units. I hope so. Our carriage home residents are mostly senior citizens, as you can see back here. We have retired doctors, military officers, professors, business executives, and business owners in our community. I would hope our new neighbors would also be of similar backgrounds. It's time for the property to be developed. Therefore, based on our meeting with Mr. Kale, I support the townhomes as we discussed. I look forward to seeing the proposed designs prior to his submission to the ARB. I would like to thank the Mayor and City Council for the time and effort on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Gordon White, 213 Brookwood.
Gordon White, 213 Brookwood, Holly Hills, carriage homes. I rise in opposition to this rezoning. As many of you members of council have seen, this area is all of a part. This is the area that it is requested to be developed is part of Holly Hills Carriage Home. It's not off in the woods somewhere. And there's been an expectation built up among the residents that what would be built there would be quite compatible. Now, we've heard the attorney for the developer say lots of nice words, but at least my wife and I have not seen anything but plan view, have not seen any elevations. The idea of having the zoning change approved and then go to the ARB to see what it'll look like, it kind of reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. You have the verdict first and testimony afterwards. I just believe that until further information is given to the residents of Holly Hills, that this zoning should be put off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Susan Langston, 184 Exmoor Court. Welcome, Susan.
Hello. My name is Susan Langston. I live at 184 Exmoor Court in the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. My husband Larry and I have lived in this wonderful community for 12 years, and I am currently serving as the treasurer of the board of directors. First, I want to thank the city councilman who visited our neighborhood during the last 2 weeks for a walkabout. Mr. Zhang, Mr. Pons, Mr. Freiling, Ms. Ramsey, and the incoming councilman, Mr. Maslin. You took the time to spend with us, to meet our residents, to see our concerns in person, on site, and to listen to our grievances and our ideas. Thank you for doing that. I especially want to commend Benny Zhang, who with very wise diplomacy brought forward a meeting of Mr. Kale, Mr. Quarles, and 3 residents of our community this past Monday night. That meeting was very, very constructive and helpful as we look forward. Mr. Kale assured us that he had read our letters and he had heard our voices. Accordingly, his plans now address our concerns as well as his independent market research. I acknowledge that market conditions and demands have changed over the last 10 years, and construction costs have changed as well. And I feel that this makes an increase in density reasonable. Mr. Kale told us in the meeting Monday night that the units will be for sale, not for rent. The units will be smaller, approximately 1,800 square feet with 9-foot ceilings. Garages will be included in the plans. First floor master bedrooms will be available. Quality exterior materials are assured and protected because we are in the Corridor Protection District. Mr. Kale and Mr. Quarles said that the new community will contribute to the maintenance of the pond, the stormwater management facility, upon completion of the project, and according to the land documents that Mr. Quarles referred to that are already on record at the city courthouse. The total number of dwelling units is yet to be determined and will depend on the architectural drawings, which are not yet completed. The price point of the townhomes is anticipated to be in the low 300s. Thank you, Mr. Kale and Mr. Quarles, for meeting with us and sharing this valuable information. We very much appreciate that you are incorporating some of our ideas in the plans going forward. Some concerns remain. Regardless of any traffic study, traffic concerns are real, especially as vehicles exit the new development onto Brookwood Drive and as vehicles turn into our neighborhood in such close proximity to their access road. High density, up to 38 dwelling units, is a major concern for us. We so much hope to see an attractive, not so crowded neighborhood there, an inviting area with adequate green space for buyers and us to enjoy. We look forward to a real community, not a complex. We are also concerned that too many units might be sold to owners who plan to rent them as an investment property. We urge Mr. Kale to limit rental homes to 10% of whatever the total number turns out to be, to ensure a stable, owner-occupied neighborhood on that parcel. And finally, I want to thank the residents of the Holly Hills Carriage Homes, my neighbors, for remarkable participation in this process that has gone on over 6 months. They have written numerous letters, they have attended meetings of the Planning Commission, they have been here at council meeting today, and I so much appreciated all of their efforts. They essentially have prevented the zoning from going to RM2. We all care deeply about this adjoining neighborhood, and we ask Mr. Kale and all of you to do the very best you can for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Langston. Next speaker's card I have is Doug Stiegler, 232 Brookwood. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the City Council and Mayor, appreciate your letting us speak this point today. I'm just going to repeat a thank you to all of you for coming out and looking at our property, for speaking with us, for hearing our concerns, giving us the information that you have available that could help us. And I too would like to thank our neighbors, our members of our community, for the efforts that they've made to make things known. And also, again, repeating it, but I think it's important to thank Mr. Kale and Mr. Quarles for their input. You've heard what they told us on Monday. We want to have that be their word and have them continue to keep that in mind when they're doing their development of plans and their development of their community. I just want to address the pond issue a little bit too. We've been maintaining that pond. I've only been in the community for 3.5 years. A lot of these members have been here for 10, 12, right from the beginning of the community. The pond has always been a big issue. It's not an eyesore because it's been maintained very well, but it's a thing that costs us a lot of money, costs us a lot of time and effort to keep it maintained. We just found out, or at least I did, and maybe some other people know it before, but there's also runoff coming from across the street, across 199 from James City County into that pond. We've been maintaining that pond for 10 years or more with no input from James City County. It just surprises me that the city has allowed another county to be using that facility and then allowing us to pay for it. We have to put a boat in there every now and again and clean out the debris that floats in from the highway. It seems to me that there should be some kind of a coordination effort, agreement effort that would alleviate us from some of that maintenance of that pond that doesn't seem to be all of our input from the water runoff into our pond. So I just wanted to add that Ms. Ramsey mentioned the sidewalk coming down Brookwood. Coming down to Brookwood from James City County. My thought on that is, once this is developed and people want to walk up to the CVS or the bank or the Restore or Rite Aid or whatever else is up there, they're not going to walk through our community. If you look at the map, you can see they'd have to walk up, take a right, go all the way up to the corner, come back, and then walk up through the woods to the water tower, and then get on the sidewalk. They're not going to do that. They're just going to walk on the grass, or they're going to walk on the side of the road. Very dangerous situation, and I think that City Council would not want to have the number of accidents that have happened on that corner anyway. We would hope they wouldn't be starting to include people instead of just fenders. So I'd like you to take consideration of that as well in your deliberations. Thank you very much, and appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Mr. Stiegler. Now, open the floor. Anybody else who'd like to address council on this matter? If you please come forward, state your name and address, and if you could limit your comments to 5 minutes, that would be helpful. Ms. Ewell, please.
Again, I just have a question. I wasn't planning this. If it were a perfect world, all these 38 units would be owner-occupied, but as we know, it's not a perfect world. And my biggest concern is investment property. And you see my notes, it was not prepared. And my question's for you. In the city ordinance, are there any limits to the number of people or families who can live in a unit, and how many times a unit may be rented within a set time, like a year? That's my concern. Thank you.
We'll answer that in our discussion. Thank you. Anybody else? Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Twitty. I live in the Woods neighborhood on Woodmere Drive, which is pretty much behind the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. But I'm also a real estate agent in the area, and so the numbers I'm about to read you come directly from our MLS that shows home sales and active listings. Within the last year in the city, there have been 162 home sales. 29 of those sales have been in the $250 to $325 price point. That's about 18%. Of the 77 current active listings, and we're at the peak time where you would see our market volume high, there are only 6 listed at that same price point right now. That's just under 8%. So 18% of our sales in the city account for only 8% of our current active market right now. So there's a need for homes in the city of Williamsburg that fall within this price point, and the developer said today he's shooting for the low 300s, which falls in that number I'm quoting. The need not only fits a market trend, because home sales in general at that price point have been strong in our area over the last 5 years, but it also fits a need I think that the city of Williamsburg has, and that's a need in keeping our William & Mary graduates here and as homeowners. I think it keeps our young professionals here and as homeowners. I think it keeps our young families here and as homeowners. And with the right floor plan that it sounds like the developer talked with the residents of the carriage homes, maybe some mastered down could appeal to the retirees as well. The numbers seem to work, but planning a successful community in Williamsburg involves more than just numbers. It involves working with the residents of the city, and especially the Holly Hills Carriage Homes, to build a product that fits the city and the current neighborhood, but it also involves listening to architects, members of different governing bodies, responding to the wants and desires of the neighborhood and the current buyer profile at the time. So I think with the proper communication, proper planning, and appropriately built product, the townhomes have a chance to be a good success. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Twitty. Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Lane Hamill on 176 Exmoor Court. While I've sat here and listened to all this, and I really appreciate it, I've only been there maybe 3.5 years in the community. My concern is when I moved into the neighborhood, I was told specifically that this section that we're talking about today was actually going to be built, same type of carriage homes that we have currently. My concern is that now we are, so many years later, and we're changing that. I understand that, Mr. Kale has gone to the community, to our board of directors, and he's told them these things that he's going to do. But as we stood here and heard also, the attorney said that maybe we'll have this and maybe we won't. So the things that were said to the board that make us support it, there's nothing that's really in writing that's going to make us say that, make that happen. And that's what my biggest concern is our board members have said, okay, we agree to this, we think it's going to be okay for our neighborhood, but who is going to hold Mr. Kale to those things when the attorney just stood up here and said, we may have garages, we may not. So I have concern about those things really coming to fruition that say that what they're going to do, they actually do. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to address council? Going once, going twice. With that, we'll close the public hearing, come back to council for discussion.
Or do you want to ask
Can
questions?
I ask, two questions. Can I ask two questions
Sure,
first? To get
absolutely.
started? One of Ms. Shelton and one of you.
Oh, great.
Ms. Shelton, the question was asked by Ms. Ewell about any city regulations on percentage of rentals within a community. Would you please answer that?
No, there is no limit in the city code on percentages of rentals. So you can rent to a family or to 3 unrelated individuals. There is no limitation on the amount of time or the number of times that a unit can be rented.
But there are limitations on the type of rental because currently right now we do not allow short-term rental.
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, so it'd have to be a residential rental. And now for either of you, what's the city doesn't govern that. What's the practical situation that a developer looking to sell homes is going to face with rentals? Is there a point at which you, in the documents, the covenants, because they're going to have restrictive covenants, that you're going to want to limit the rentals to make those houses sell?
So in my professional experience, that rental restriction usually only comes in after the developer leaves. And the neighborhood transitions to owner control.
Number? Do you know?
It really depends on what the neighborhood wants. And condominiums, there's somewhat of this is not a condominium, there's somewhat of a imposed limit because of FHA loans. That's not in play here.
Okay.
I had some questions on.
No.
Oh, we are doing that. Okay, perfect.
I just want to get Ms. Ewell's question answered first before we went. Do you have questions?
No questions.
No questions, I don't think.
Not at the second, but I may.
Reserve the right to come back. Mr. Zhang, you have questions?
Carolyn, I had one question and I had one for council. Whatchamacallit, I think there's, in terms of the corridor protection, can you describe that a little bit to us? And also, there's setback requirements. And I also remember and recall when we had some of these proposals come through, we mandated that certain trees be kept for noise mitigation, but this is mostly towards the Richmond Road corridor. What can we kind of expect from this particular parcel?
199 is in a buffer zone, so there's a 50-foot buffer.
Right,
That
and
they
that'd be
have to
trees.
stay out of, which is basically what was cleared is you see the buffer between 199 and the office project that was there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the corridor protection district, the Architecture Review Board has guidelines. Wood, of course, brick, cementitious siding, the windows, the trim materials, the roof materials, all of those things are covered in the design review guidelines, and the Architecture Review Board approves those as part of the project. They also get to look at the lighting, any furniture, outdoor furniture, recreational areas will come up. There's a certain percentage of that would need to be done. So the Architecture Review Board looks at basically any site elements, the architecture of the buildings, those types of things, fencing, all of those that's done as part of the project.
Okay. And
Let me just add, and so
Please.
this would also include any enclosure areas or storage areas that were like behind a fence or something like that?
That's
as well?
correct, for trash enclosures, screening for mechanical equipment, decks, porches, screen porches, all of those things are reviewed by the Architecture Review Board.
And including elevations, that's all going to be included into the site plan that's submitted by the applicant.
The applicant would submit a site plan, and before Planning Commission could make a recommendation on the site plan, the Architecture Review Board would have to look at all those elements and approve those before Planning Commission could make a recommendation of approval or denial or some action on
And
the
one
plan.
of the neighbors made a really good point in terms of, given how this process has been, we decide on the zoning matter, and then later they will submit plans, and there's some fluidity in terms of what may or may not happen from the developer side. Have we ever had any instances in prior zoning considerations where a developer came in with a written, bunch of written stuff that he had promised or whatever? Probably not,
Or the
right?
plans in advance.
Or the plans in advance, right.
This
I'm just curious.
is a straight-up rezoning, and the rezoning is with proffers, and the applicant has not proffered anything other than removing the 20-unit limit and the $60,000 towards the sidewalk construction.
Right.
So if that's accepted to council and it is approved, then the developer would go through the design review process, and there's nothing in the design review process currently that requires a garage or a first floor master bedroom or those things that were brought up previously. That's something the developer would indicate on the site plan, but there's nothing in my ordinance that would require that if it's not a part of the requirement made by a proffer for the zoning change.
And this may be easily observable, but I just want to get it out there. So what the ARB will consider is based on that zoning classification and that corridor protection district. It's not like the ARB will take the same standards that are considered for developments like Midtown Row or other parts of the city into this consideration, right? This is residential units, has to complement the neighboring parcel of land and the neighboring building, and has to complement that, right?
That's one of the criteria in the Architecture Review Board look, and yes, each neighborhood is looked at differently, so when the development comes through, the Architecture Review Board can look at the adjacent neighborhoods and see if the design is compatible to those adjacent neighborhoods. But just remember, the Architecture Review Board does not review the interior of a project, just the exterior.
Sure. And then I had one question for Mr. Quarles, if you don't mind.
If you come to the podium, sir. It's helpful for the people watching at home to be able to hear you.
So, Council, I had a quick question with regarding, this was inquired by one of the residents when we did our walkabout, and I wanted to make sure that there was an answer to it. Or maybe the Vice Mayor may speak to this, but I'm not an HOA lawyer. I have no interest in being an HOA lawyer, but I can't really say that for sure. But in terms of, there was a question about, given that the neighborhood is so small and this parcel of land is basically within what they call the Holly Hills carriage homes, why couldn't the covenant be one of the same? Why does it have to have a separate HOA as opposed to covenanting with the existing HOA that's been there for years?
That would be logistically very, very difficult, but let me kind of answer that in two steps. First of all, the comment was made that, this is part of the Holly Hills Carriage Homes neighborhood, and that actually is not accurate. Since this property was platted back in 1997, this parcel was always contemplated as not part of the Holly Hills Carriage Home. Back in 1997, when this property was subdivided and the plats are recorded at the courthouse.
I don't think he meant from a legal zoning perspective, but
15 acres Holly Hills Carriage Homes and then 7 acres as the office park. And it was always contemplated to be an office park until 2007. Right. Until 1997, when he went back and asked to have it, until 2007 when he asked to rezone it back. So, and at that point in time, he did discuss having 10 more carriage homes, at which point it might have been treated like another phase of the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. However, to join it to the Holly Hills Carriage Homes would require a vote by a majority of the Holly Hills Carriage Homes, as Holly Hills Carriage Homes recently did. They reenacted their declaration of restrictive covenants. I believe that Mr. Foster's law firm may have been involved in drafting those documents. And when you go back and you redo a declaration of restrictive covenants, you can't just go do that willy-nilly. You've got to get everybody, and it depends on the specific documents, how many people who are part of the community have to vote and approve that. So it's not something that we could unilaterally do. We couldn't just decide as the owners of these 7 acres that we're going to make this part of the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. It would involve, it would be a great big process.
There's not really any legal precedent of these.
It's not how development usually proceeds.
It's not usually how.
Right.
You could tell how I don't know anything about HOA laws. So.
Now, when you talk about the 15-acre parcel that was developed, or you're talking about a parcel that you put to record and you're going to have a neighborhood on it that's a planned community, sometimes that gets developed in phases. That's all owned by one person. Here you've got 2 parcels that are owned by different people. So we can't unilaterally decide that, well, we're just going to be part of your neighborhood. And so it would have to be a collaborative process, and I can foresee difficulties arising in doing that. The 7-acre parcel is owned by Holly Hills LLC, and they've got a right to develop it and implement what kind of restrictive covenants they want to implement on that parcel that they think are going to be attractive to the market. And a neighborhood that limits to only 5 units out of 62 is, chilling on the market. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And just one more as a quick follow-up. So I know you have mentioned this before, and some of the residents have spoken to this, but in terms of the BMP and the portion of share that's going to be contributed from this parcel, that's deeded and recorded in the courthouse, correct? So
that's correct.
Even though some of the aspects of discussions that may have occurred between Mr. Kayla and members of the HOA board, this one is definitely in writing and is in full legal effect, so they have to pay their fair share.
Covenant running with the land.
That's right. Okay. Thank you.
If I could follow up on the BMP, and I don't know that this is a question for you, but maybe Mr. Small, can we determine who on the James City County side is responsible? Can we delineate a certain part of a neighborhood, or is it coming off of 199? If there was some recourse by the Carriage Homes and the Holly Hills new developer to want to go across the street and find some additional money to participate in any maintenance, is that even possible?
Well, most of the drainage that comes through that area was actually pre-existing, coming off of 199 when 199 was built in the 70s. And so what the developer did when they developed the BMP in that location, that drainage was just incorporated instead of bypassed.
So it's right off the road.
And so, yeah, most of it is from 199 itself. Very little of it comes from the developed area on the other side.
It'd be hard to get money out of VDOT,
Yes.
I'm sure. Good luck.
I think just to add to what Mr. Small is saying, to clarify, it was designed with that extra runoff in mind.
Right. No, I don't dispute that it isn't adequately maintained, or isn't adequate. I'm not disputing that the pond isn't adequately of size to handle everything. I just wanted to see if there was a way to get some money out of whoever.
Don't go anywhere yet, Mr. Quarles.
Not at the moment.
May I ask you a couple of questions? Just to clarify your earlier comments about the garages and it seems from what I've heard from you, a couple of things are going to drive whether or not garages are on these units. One is what the market's going to demand. Nobody's interested in building a product that nobody wants to buy. I don't know the full answer. Maybe Mr. Twitty has a better idea, but my expectation is most people spending $300,000 on a home are going to want a garage. So I think from that standpoint, that's encouraging. But where I think you're trying to keep that flexibility is you do not want to promise something for 100% of the units when 100% of the units may not end up with a garage, because again, as I understand it, your client intends to build to some degree, I don't want to call them spec homes, but homes that are individually designed to meet the needs of that particular customer so that they have more input and flexibility in the process. And it is possible that you could get somebody who needed more downstairs space and therefore would be willing to sacrifice the garage in order to get that. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the opposite of spec homes. Spec homes, that's short for speculative, where you build a house, hope somebody wants it. They want to have somebody pick out a design and then build that design. And as you've heard, some of the units are contemplated to be master bedrooms on the first level. And my recollection of the conversation that we had the other night with the residents was that on those units with a master bedroom downstairs, it's difficult to do a garage on that plan. So I can't stand here and promise, and I don't believe that Mr. Kale promised, that all these units are going to have garages. But what we do know is that if we show up at ARB and with plans that don't have any garages, we're going to look like we told a fib, and these people are going to be very upset, and we're probably not going to get our ARB passed.
We would be disappointed too.
Yes.
And one other question, just going back to the BMP, the reason the property, the developer has not been contributing to the BMP to this point is because they just have raw land. There's one small section of paved road, but basically it's all permeable surface, so the assumption is that the water would be absorbed into the lawn or grass area.
That's correct. There's no culverts or stormwater infrastructure in place carrying water from the Holly Hills parcel into the retention pond. However,
but the client did invest in it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
But I don't think it's entirely accurate to say that Holly Hills hasn't contributed. It's my understanding that they've spent some $14,000 to making improvements to the BMP over the years that the city has requested. So they've been contributing along the way as well.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for you for right now. Ms. Murphy, can I come back to you for a minute? Thank you, Mr. Quarles. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind, if we could finish our conversation. Ms. Murphy, when this, we don't know what it's going to look like eventually because we don't have a site plan. And we normally don't have a site plan at this point in a process, which is what I think Mr. Zhang was getting at.
That's correct.
The developer is not going, most developers, correct me if I'm wrong, are not going to invest the money in doing engineering work when they don't know that that engineering work can be applied to a project because they need the zoning first in order to begin that. But once it is done and the requirements are placed on the development through the site plan process, is it fair to say that the area on the undeveloped, currently undeveloped side of the BMP will be improved in a way to prevent any, as much as possible, future erosion and direct that water into the BMP in a less impactful way?
I think that's a fair statement, and also on that side, I think we would require landscaping and other items such as that to help with the erosion and to make that area look better than it does today.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back to council for comments.
Sure.
Thoughts?
So I'm going to take this in two parts. Scope of our review really boils down to 38 units versus 20 units and the issues associated with that increase. To me, that's traffic, runoff impervious surface, intensity of use, number of people. Staff is satisfied with what we know about that. In my opinion, staff's satisfied, so am I. So, understanding that's the limited scope of our review in this decision, I'll speak to the other topics that are important but not necessarily part of our core consideration. My professional role, I have been doing a lot of closings on a neighborhood within a new neighborhood within a half mile of this project. Very similar model, very similar footprint. And because we're doing all the initial sales in this neighborhood, I've gotten to meet all the folks moving in. Two things. Everyone that has been moving there has been extremely excited for this stage in their life for two reasons. These folks are either my age and buying their first home, or they're empty nesters who are either downsizing, moving closer to their kids, or just finally making the move to Williamsburg they've been thinking about forever. Intermixed in that has probably been at least two folks who have bought this as an investment property. In two situations, a parent and their child have bought adjacent units with the child living upstairs and the parent living on the first floor. Seems pretty smart to me. And I think this neighborhood is going to offer that same or similar opportunity for folks making transitions in life. Second, having recently bought a home in Williamsburg, it's tough to find something under $325,000. I think we need that product, and I know that there's been a number of price points thrown around, and I know there'll be various upgrades available, but that's the reason so many young folks are buying in Skipwith Farms, where I live. It's one of the few places you can find that product. Also know a bunch of young professionals who are living in Newtown, paying a lot for rent, Newtown and other similar areas, kind of swimming in circles around the city of Williamsburg waiting for something to pop up. I think this is a great opportunity. As far as the appearance goes, I'm confident that the ARB is going to get that right. You can look around town. They've gotten it right everywhere else. I mean, all the stuff that's been built the last 5 years in the city of Williamsburg residential that has had ARB approval, I'd be proud to live in. I think it's going to hold up in the long term. So I think we've got a good track record on making that work. As far as garages go, represent a lot of neighborhoods. I can tell you, garages do not mean, having a garage doesn't mean you park inside. Most people's garages are full of stuff. And that's an issue. So a garage doesn't mean no cars on the street.
Excuse me, please.
So if there are garages, that'll be welcome. I mean, I understand there'll be a mix, and I appreciate the conversation y'all have had. And third, thanks to Benny and others, this conversation has gone from here to here. And I think it's a testament to the neighborhood and your all's ability to develop a consensus, and the developer being willing to come forward and really negotiate and bring us a good product. So when I consider the core scope of our review here, 20 versus 38, I have no problem with those 18 additional units.
Ms. Ramsey?
Well, listening through the conversations, I came up with a few C's to add to your core and consensus. And one is, I think we will all grant that this is a very complicated history. I mean, just trying to follow what happened from 1984 to here, it's very difficult to keep track of all of that. And one thing that I heard when I was visiting the site is that they want this complication to end and for the project to be finished. They want the neighborhood to be completely built out so they can go on with their lives. Secondly is communication, and I would like to thank the Holly Hills community for inviting us to come visit you and to talk to you and to see the site and to get your input. I think that's been very helpful in further conversations. And another thing I heard when I was out there, in addition to the garages and wanting the project to be finished, is that you all want an assurance that this project is going to be of high quality. And I think that compatibility will come through it being in the ARB Corridor Protection District. As Scott said, I think that the history of projects that have recently been constructed here in Williamsburg and that I've sort of followed once I've been on council a little bit closer sort of bears that out. There's been a number of projects where, the starting design is so far different from what it ends up with, and I think that the materials that are going to be required and the oversight on this project and the professionalism of the people that are involved with the ARB will ensure that a good design comes through. And then I think another thing to take into account is also what's been said here is that this is a competitive market. And if Mr. Kale builds the townhouses and wants them to sell, then he's going to have to take into account what is available in other markets in the city and in the county. And the majority of them are at about this price point. Looking through some of them, they're about 1,800 to 2,100 square feet, and the majority of them have garages. And if they don't have a garage, then they have adequate storage space as an option. So I think that some of those things are going to be market driven just because he doesn't want to build these units and not be able to sell them, and has to be competitive with the market. So based on what we've heard from you and what we've heard from him, I think that we need to have faith and believe that this project will bear out, and that the ARB will take into account the concerns, and that the project will be of quality.
Another C. Again, compliments to Councilman Zhang for going the extra effort to get some of the board members together with the developer. Part of what we heard early on was a developer in the neighborhood hadn't had the opportunity to get together, and I don't think that was malicious in any means. But Benny, you did a great job to help tamp down some of the apprehension. So I appreciate that. This comes down to whether we want to help this developer and this property conform to the comprehensive plan zoning, and it is RM1 at 8 units an acre. This has a previous proffer of 20, and so we're being asked to remove that 20. I think a lot of things have changed, and I was on Planning Commission when Mr. Kale came and wanted to remove or change from the commercial to the from the commercial to the residential. And the question then was, should we allow this to happen? But, High Street, Newtown, all these new commercial places were started to develop, and I think we all recognized then that to build office park there would not be successful because of the competition and the location. And we recognized then that it would be in the best interest of the city and the residents to allow that change. And I think Mr. Kale offered the 20, and we heard from Mr. Quarles the why. Today what's changed, it's a competitive market. And I think in order for this development, the neighbor said it's time for this project to take off. We needed to get it done. And I think removing the previous proffer of 20 to allow the developer the ability to build more units so that the project can be more successful by having higher quality garages, no garage, whatever it is, it'll be a higher quality and better appointed if you can build more units. And I think that's in the best interest of the current residents of the Holly Hills carriage homes. Price points will be commensurate, and I think having that little bit of diversity actually makes the neighborhood that much stronger, or makes the community, whether it's two parts of it, but really it'll have the feel of one, but it'll be a stronger community if the developer can build good quality products. And I believe that Mr. Kale, being a resident of Williamsburg, he's a member of the EDA, he's going to want to do that. This isn't an opportunity for him to make some money and leave town. So I think he's committed to that, and I have belief that he can do that. So I'm going to support 20.
Well, first, I want to express my deep appreciation to all the folks and the residents of the Holly Hills carriage homes for their proactive advocacy. Can you imagine what would happen with our governments higher up if we actually had folks that were as actively engaged as you were? I think it'd be much better and held more accountable. So, simply put, it was deeply inspiring to see that. And I think it's a testament, throughout the input, whether there were some some of the emotions that were put out. I think I've seen that only as a positive. I've only seen that as a testament to how much you care about your neighborhood. And I'm glad that that was conveyed to the developer and to the lawyer, that this cannot be some putty development, and it has to be something that uniquely complements the character of your neighborhood, whether it's one neighborhood or legally rezoning, they see as two different parcels. It's all one neighborhood when folks come in to the Holly Hills carriage home. So I just wanted to make sure I express my deep appreciation there, because it takes away from your time. But I think for all of us, we've been informed very well, our decisions. And however we decide today, I think all of us will make a well-informed decision. So kind of in thinking what Scott was saying, very lawyerly terms to say with the scope and all that. And I do believe the core scope of things is definitely to consider the zoning aspect. But I've also considered it Scott, for example, is a resident of Skipwood Farms. I'm a resident of Burns Lane. We hold our character of our neighborhoods in very high regard. And I considered the factors of what happens if we had the 20 units as opposed to the 38 that's being considered today. And I try to really frame this around this idea of a reasonable neighbor. So what happens as a resident of Burns Lane? It's hard to put, our situation in your shoes. You guys actually live in the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. I live in Burns Lane, high quality neighborhoods, but very different nevertheless. From my situation, if I were in Burns Lane as a resident and there was a developable tract of land that's being put up for city council vote, kind of what would I want and what would I be concerned about? And I think a lot of the concerns that have been conveyed have really flowed through that thought process. This is one that I've thought a lot. And it was not easy to come to a certain decision one way or other. So the first scenario is council would deny the zoning and it'll be stuck with a by right 20 units. What could happen? The developer has said that it would be non-economical, and assuming through that, he may convey that to some other unknown person. And being unknown, some developer that may be out of town, it could be one from the neighborhood, from the city, from the county, we don't know. But the unknowns add up. And my concern in that footing as a reasonable neighbor is what will happen to those 20 units to keep it economically feasible. There's a high propensity to put them out, all of them, as rental units. And I know there's been a strong expressed concern of having all those investment properties there. But to convey it possibly to another developer who will then end up renting all 20 units, I don't know if I would want that if I were living on Burns Lane, and that would have been a consideration. That's just one possible scenario. I'm not saying that has to be the scenario, but that would seem from a market standpoint that would be something that they would do. Then we have the present scenario, permit up to 38 units. And some of the things based on the conversations with the developer and from what I've heard from their conversations with the neighbor, it's still restricted to HOA as it would with by right 20, but with this one, there's a fee simple opportunity for home ownership. Speaking from a broad city standpoint, this city council has approved a lot of rental units over the years. Some folks will recall Midtown Row, the 96 units we have in High Street, correct me if I'm wrong. This proposal is intended to be home ownership, homeowner occupied, which is something we have not seen in recent years, and it will be a welcome addition to our community. That's something that we desire, and something that as rentals, in the midst of having these conversations, there's that desire, I think, in the marketplace, but also policy-wise in our discussions to find those areas to promote home ownership. I think this is one of those, and the applicant has indicated so. There's an HOA. The BMP issue was a huge issue, and I'm glad that the covenant running with the land requires the new parcel owners to contribute their fair share into the BMP pond that the Holly Hills Carriage Homes HOA currently does. And it fulfills, basically in my view, the overall goals, initiatives, and outcomes that this city council has construed for the city as a whole, and also for what we want in our highly desirable neighborhoods. My final point is I've been encouraged by the conversations by both parties, and thank you for all your times in meeting with them, but it cannot stop here today. And my hopes, and I'll be keeping a close eye, not that I can do much beyond this point, is to ensure that that conversation continues. It's been mentioned that Mr. Kale, the developer, is a resident of the city, and he has a stake and skin in the game. And my hopes is to have a successful project, you've got to be able to talk to your neighbors. And I hope on both sides in good faith you'll be able to work that out. And I look forward to seeing the feedback and hearing the feedback and the plans that'll be considered to the ARB. But the conversation must continue, and it's hard for some of, I can imagine, in the neighborhood to hear this, because those who have lived there for years and years have seen or may have responded to some of what Mr. Kale's actions have been throughout the years. And the faith might be a little bit testy sometimes, but I think based on where we are at this point, I think both sides can come together, and I hope that the conversation will continue. Maybe this is a result of my youthful exuberance. Maybe I don't know any better. I'm younger. I haven't been tested by years of tested times and hardships, but I think there'll be a genuine good effort here, and I hope that will be the case. So I'll be supporting this proposal as well. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Is that it?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you all for, not only for being here today, but for the regular communication that we've had the opportunity to receive over the past several months. It's hard to think of any particular issue that has generated more emails. I think there was one point when we were considering banning guns from city council meetings, and we got emails from all over the country in the thousands, but I'll skip that. I mean, you really showed a willingness to get involved. And we've heard you. We've read your emails. We've listened to what you had to say. We came to visit. And I think the developer has heard you too. He's had 2 prior proposals that he submitted that he withdrew before they ever went through the planning commission process because he understood how the neighborhood felt about what he was proposing. And now he's come up with a 3rd one, modifying all along the way. We've taken what we've heard from you and shared it with the developer as well, and heard what he had to say. And he listened to everything we had to say, and he is sympathetic. I'd just like to go through, I know other people have covered it, but just to touch on a few of these things briefly. The issue of garages, he hears that. He wants to put garages in the units, and he also wants to sell the units. Not everyone may have one, but he wants to put them there. I take it that a lot of the reason you want garages is so all that stuff that people tend to stuff in their garage doesn't end up in the front yard. I totally get that. And from what I understand, if he can't put a garage, he's going to look at a way to put enclosures for people to be able to put some of that stuff. It won't be as big as a garage, it won't be a garage, but it's a way to keep this trash and recycling bins and some other things that most people keep outside. Landscape buffer. You're concerned about what happens in the wintertime when all the foliage on the other side of the BMP, some of it will be gone, and you're looking right into these townhomes from what you previously had as a natural view shed. He has an interest in making sure that buffer is better than it is now, because he not only wants to help protect your view, he wants to protect the view of the people he's trying to sell these homes to so that they're looking at something natural at the same time. And that additional landscaping, he's not going to do it himself. He's going to hire a landscape architect to come in and do it the right way and put in the types of plants that will be there throughout the year and will also stabilize that bank and create the greatest possible anchor to keep future erosion from happening. Traffic. I know that's a concern, and I'm not trying to minimize that at all. I think what Mr. Quarles was saying is that most of the traffic is going to be right up at the front of the neighborhood. The way I understand the flow, and Mr. Small, correct me if I'm wrong, if I am going to what I'm now calling the hamlet of Holly Hills, because I don't know what we're calling this proposed development, if I'm coming off of 199 into there and I'm taking that right turn into this new proposed development, there is nothing for me to stop or yield for at that point, correct? So I'm going to have an immediate flow right into that area, and I've got a very long, or not very long, I've got a reasonably long stacking area before I actually get into any area where I'm going to put my car, so the odds of that traffic backing out onto the entry road seem pretty small based upon the number of units. Regardless, it's a heck of a lot better than having 40,000 square feet of office and 200 parking spaces. The impact that would have had on this community would have been much more significant. The BMP we've talked about a lot. The shared maintenance will be a benefit once they start putting in disturbing the land and putting in that impervious surface. They're going to be participating in the maintenance of the BMP. The community will participate in it going forward because that's all codified. And none of you do financial work. I don't do financial work. They always say when you buy stock, past performance is never a guarantee of future results. That's usually reserved to the stock market because they can't guarantee what the stock market's going to do. I know when I go shop at a business, or I go to a restaurant, or I go anywhere in this community where I've had multiple good experiences, I'm thinking the odds are pretty good that I'm going to have another good experience at that business. I can't guarantee it, but it usually plays out. Mr. Kale and his family developed Holly Hills. They did a beautiful job in Holly Hills. Mr. Kale and his family, and I'm talking about the senior Mr. Kale now, Senior Hatcher Kale and his family developed Holly Hills Carriage Homes. They built that neighborhood that you love. And when they did that, the people in Holly Hills were concerned about what Holly Hills Carriage Homes was going to do to the value of their property, because it was different. And they saw it as somehow a diminishment of the quality of their offerings. I understand why you'd be concerned, anybody would be concerned about development happening next door. But Mr. Kale's track record should carry some weight in the quality he's going to try to deliver, because he wants to finish this project that his family started and has been referenced. He lives in the neighborhood. So does his brother. I would be much more concerned, as Mr. Zhang referenced, if he went into despair and decided to sell, sold it to somebody who brings in a tract home builder who puts up 20 units by right. And gosh, you know, it could be a whole different environment. I know it's kind of a doomsday scenario if you think about them renting out all 20 units, but it's not out of the question, because this whole area seems to have an insatiable appetite for rental housing. And every time a new rental complex is built, it fills. And so from the investment standpoint, somebody might see that as an opportunity for cash flow, and it might make sense. Compatible does not have to be identical. I think there is some benefit to this area not looking just like the Holly Hills Carriage Homes. I think Mr. Quarles alluded to it, or somebody did. If it did, you would basically have brand new product, identical to what's already there, available for sale, which would depress sales in your community potentially for at least the period of time until that built out, and possibly beyond. When you can build something that brings in other people that's at a different price point, it creates an interesting variation in the market that makes the overall area more interesting to a potential buyer. I'm not saying you should like what he's going to build. That's your decision. That's your personal call. But from a selling standpoint, there's real value in that variation. If you go out to Kings Mill or even Ford's Colony, they have different pockets or areas with different themes and different identities, because people don't want to live in all just the same thing. They want a little bit of variation, and he will accomplish that. The home price is also a positive. Many of my colleagues have discussed this, creating an entry level or point of entry that's more within reason for younger people, that's even more palatable to some people who want to downsize, and still giving him the flexibility and the room to build a quality product on that site. The city of Williamsburg it's an odd place in some ways. We're a city. Cities are usually thought of as urban areas. We seem to be an urban area with a whole bunch of suburbs inside. And that's not usual, because of the way we've developed, because of the historic history. This is going to be one more little suburban place in this community, but it, by its nature, if it has this density, will be just a little bit more urban than the Holly Hills Carriage Homes, and more urban than Holly Hills. And that's, again, that part of that attractiveness and taking the best of both the urban and the suburban environments. The one thing I would ask staff, that's you, Mr. Trivett, just making sure you're listening, is that the question was raised about the $60,000. What happens to that? And we've answered that. It just goes into the reserves and could be used in the CIP or elsewhere. I would like for staff to begin looking at, if this passes and starts to move forward and we get through a site plan, that we start to look at what do we have to do to start the process, because it could take a long time, to get that sidewalk connected from the edge of Holly Hills Carriage Homes all the way down to that entrance point, so that the folks from either neighborhood have the opportunity to enter that sidewalk. As the gentleman pointed out, we don't want, obviously nobody wants a pedestrian casualty. And it just makes a lot more sense for ease of access. And one of our commitments throughout as long as I've been on council and planning commission, is to connect neighborhoods with the rest of the city. So if we could start exploring that, I don't know if VDOT owns the land, if James City County owns it.
Certainly. Ms. Burke and I actually had a conversation about that this week already.
Thank you. I know you all are tired of listening to us, but just one more time. I know these guys are going to want to jump in with more comments, but thank you again for all the input that you've given us. And please don't think, even if this passes, that this was for naught. I think we're going to end up with a much better project as a result. And then, why don't you invite us back, even if we're not on council anymore, when the project is done, and then tell us what you think about it. And we'll listen to that too, because we can learn from that. Any other comments?
You want a motion? I move that PCR 18-011 be approved as recommended by Planning Commission.
Second.
Ms. Felica?
Mr. Zane?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Okay, that concludes our public hearings for today. Now we go to monthly financial statement. Ms. Dameron, Mr. Trivett, anything you'd like
I'm happy to lead off, and if Ms. Dameron wants to add anything, she certainly can. The financial statement is pretty
Why don't you
straight.
just take just a minute? I'm sorry, let's just, how about, can we take just a 5-minute recess at this point? Just to give folks a little break, we'll come right back. Thank you. Recess.
Know that.
Concludes our recess. Mr. Trivett, back to you on the monthly financial statement.
Okay, so in the interest of time, the financial statement is pretty straightforward. Obviously, there's a couple of things that we're watching pretty closely, and that is the meals and lodging tax continue to be down for the month of April. I think 4%, in the neighborhood of 4% for the lodging tax, and then 3% for the meals tax. And the good news is that the other revenues are outpacing our expectations a little bit, and expenditures are down. So I don't think they're going to see a major impact beyond what we've already forecasted to the end of the year budget.
It's wild to me that, sorry, I'm out of order.
No, please.
It's wild to me that rooms and meals are down somewhat significantly for the month of April, but sales are way up.
Right.
7%.
Right.
Well, yeah.
So,
Well, and part of that is...
Riddle me
is-
that.
Is any of that
Well,
due to...
different months, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, because sales tax lags a month.
Ms.
But
Dameron, can
oh,
you,
excuse me, that's March. I
can you
apologize.
bring us up to date on where we are with the correction on the
Of
sales tax?
For the sales tax on getting that matched up with prior year?
Well, yeah, that and where had sales tax that was previously being collected in James City County but recorded in the city.
I believe we finished those transfers already, so that's one component, plus it's an additional month lag, so it's not comparable with what we're seeing coming in for the meals and room. They're different months. And then, of course, as we finish out this year and begin a new year, then our prior and current year will become more comparable because of the lag in some revenues as a result of the software implementation.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah. Monthly departmental operating reports?
Just as they're submitted, if you've got questions, we're here to answer them.
I'll just make a point. I rarely look at them because you have to follow the link, and then it's a little awkward on the iPad. So still need to get used to them.
Yearn for the good old days with no technology.
When it comes to those operational reports.
This takes us to city manager reports. Mr. Trivett?
I don't think we have any other than the staff reports provided by the city engineer.
Okay. Mr. Small, welcome.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the amendment before you today modifies our original memorandum of agreement with Hampton Roads Sanitation District and other localities that City Council approved back in February 13th of 2014. That original MOA set the stage for a hybrid regionalization approach for meeting the requirements of the federal consent decree and the Virginia special order by consent that was placed on the sanitary sewer systems serving the entire Hampton Roads region. Under that memorandum of agreement, it relieved localities of the responsibility to make wet weather capacity improvements to their systems. Localities are only responsible for maintenance, operation, and management, also known as MOM, of their collection systems. HRSD assumed the responsibility for the wet weather capacity in the entire regional sanitary sewer system, which was defined to include also the locality's collection systems as well as HRSD's interceptor system. HRSD's responsibility, though, for that wet weather capacity included all liability for overflows, but it would only commence upon completion of the construction and rehab work identified in the approved regional wet weather management plan. This was originally estimated to occur around 2043. Since that time of the original agreement, HRSD has prepared and submitted an adaptive management-based integrated plan to satisfy the requirements of the federal consent decree, and it included incorporating the SWIFT project as well. Under this plan, HRSD will perform priority wet weather work in 5 areas between 2018 and 2030. These 5 areas will reduce regional wet weather overflow volumes by nearly 50% with a $200 million investment. At the same time, HRSD will implement SWIFT, investing an estimated $1 billion in this important sustainable initiative. In 2028, HRSD will then revisit the regional wet weather capacity needs, validate assumptions used in the plan, gather updated data, and develop a final remedial measures plan to address the remaining wet weather flow issues in the region. That will be submitted to EPA in 2030. Depending on the extent of that plan, completion of the wet weather work would likely extend out beyond 2053. So given the extended schedule, HRSD is willing to accept responsibility and liability for all regional wet weather overflows much earlier than proposed in the original MOA, which, as I mentioned before, would have been about 2043. The amendment is required to transfer this liability to HRSD upon approval of the integrated plan, which should occur next year, as opposed to upon completion of that work for the regional wet weather management plan in 2043. Because the originally envisioned basis for determining whether an overflow was capacity related used a specific level of service rating, terminology had to be modified as the regional system would not have been upgraded to meet their original level of service conditions. So the amendment also adds a broader definition of capacity related overflows, whereby HRSD and the localities will jointly investigate suspected overflows and reach a mutual agreement as to the cause and the responsible entity that would have to fix those areas. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have about the agreements.
No questions.
No questions.
Just said.
The one thing that caught me was 2053.
Yeah, so transfer of, the concept of transfer of liability sounds like it's always a good thing when it takes a liability off of us and puts it to somebody else. But somebody has to pay for that. So we're going to end up paying for it regionally as a participant in HRSD?
Essentially, yes. What's happened is because of the SWIFT projects requiring $1 billion of investment, they're not able to meet the requirements of the regional wet weather management plan at the same time. So they need to buy time. And so what they're doing is they're saying, we're going to fix these key areas. That allows us to put off some of the other work, implement SWIFT, and do that. So in order for us to agree to that, we're willing to take that responsibility earlier.
And remind me, SWIFT, is that the injection of
SWIFT
water?
is the injection of the treated wastewater.
To stabilize
it's
the
treated to water conditions.
Yes.
And if you don't believe me, I've actually seen Mr. Clayton drink right out of the tap at the research center. So.
Any reason why we wouldn't do this?
No, not really. I can't think of any. What it does is it makes this overall fix to the sewer systems in the area much longer.
I move that City Council authorize the city manager to execute the amended agreement.
Second.
Ms. Felico?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Transfer of gavel. Since this involves the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation, I will not participate in this conversation or vote on this matter.
Considering the extension of an agreement with Mellow Mushroom. Michelle?
Sure. Mr. Vice Mayor and members of council, I'm good to see you today. This is an amendment to a performance agreement that you and the Economic Development Authority approved in October of 2017 to provide a tax incentive to Colonial Williamsburg for the Mellow Mushroom Restaurant locating at the corner of Henry and Francis Street. The deadline for that restaurant to open and be operating according to that agreement was July 1st, and construction delays and an overly optimistic construction timeline have delayed that. They do plan to open by this fall, but the amendment before you asks to extend that date through December 31st, 2018, this year, to the performance agreement.
Friends, any questions?
No, I mean, I've noticed that they're under construction now and moving along, and everyone's excited and anticipating their opening. So I have no problems with extending the agreement.
Makes perfect sense. They can't be open, we ought to extend it.
Can't wait for it to open.
Agreed. Entertain a
Okay.
motion?
So I move to approve the amendment to extend the deadline for commencement of full-scale commercial operation of the Mellow Mushroom Restaurant from July 1, 2018 to December 31st, 2018.
Second.
Ms. Flico?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryland?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Takes us to city attorney reports, Ms. Shelton.
I have nothing else.
And unfinished business? We have 2 items of new business, appointments to boards and commissions.
I can introduce that item, Mayor, if you'd like me to.
Oh, okay.
Essentially, this is a little bit of housekeeping every year. The boards and commissions roster becomes vacant in June and then again in December, and we have to make various and sundry appointments to fill those. There's a whole host of folks that are eligible and willing to serve as reappointments to those boards and commissions, and a few that need to be appointed as new members. And so that's the item of action for you today.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this is for expediency's sakes, but I was wondering if we could also do a block vote of the resolution 18-05, just considering the fact that it's also an appointment to a board, and just vote it out at once. Is that okay under Robert's rules?
I'm not. Didn't hear what you said.
To
1805 is appointing and reappointing members to the Quarterpath Community
and just put in
Development.
one vote also
You
with,
can do that all in one motion.
if everyone's okay with that.
Yes.
So we're doing something different now, though, right?
Basically,
By the time
we're
we spend it
moving.
talking about it.
We're appointing the appointments for the one that we're discussing, and also moving that the resolution 18-05 be approved.
Perhaps Benny can make a motion.
So we need to move to appoint those people and move that the city council adopt resolution 18-05.
Yes, sir.
All right. I'll make this motion. Move that all current boards and commission members who are eligible and willing to be reappointed, and that the city council appoint Michael Gomez to the Services Advisory Board, Michelle Huguette Barnett to the Williamsburg Area Arts Commission, Andrew Trivett to the Quarterpath Community Development Authority, and Andrew Trivett to the Williamsburg Library Board, in addition to resolution 18-05.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Okay, this takes us to open forum. Anybody who would like to address council on any matter, please come forward. Mr. Braxton, you have anything for us? Thank you. See no one, close the open forum. Do we happen to have anything for closed session?
That we do. Move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing one personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning city attorney compensation.
Ms. Felica?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Fryland?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
We will now go into closed session.